Eleanor Whitmore pressed the letter flat against her chest with both hands, the way a woman holds something that is already dead. 7 days on a train, 6 months of promises, and a station worker who would not look her in the eye. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "Thomas Caldwell married another woman 3 weeks ago." Her suitcase hit the boards and did not stop her. If a story about a woman with nothing left but her own 2 hands means something to you, subscribe and stay to the end. And tell me in the comments what city you're watching from. I'd love to see how far this story has traveled. Eleanor Whitmore did not pick the suitcase back up. She stood there with the letter still against her chest, and her hands did not shake, and that frightened her more than shaking would have. A woman ought to shake. A woman ought to weep. Instead, she felt something inside her go quiet, the way a house goes quiet after everybody has left it. "Say it again," she said. The station worker rubbed the back of his neck. He was an old man with a bad shoulder and 40 years of telling people things they didn't want to hear, and he had never gotten one bit better at it. "Ma'am." "Say it again, please." "Thomas Caldwell sold out and married the Harlow girl 3 weeks back. There was a supper and everything." He looked at the boards between them. "Half this town was there." "Half this town?" Eleanor repeated. "Yes'm." "And nobody wrote to me. Weren't nobody's business to." Eleanor turned her head slowly and looked down the length of the platform, and there were 4 people standing on it, and every single one of them was watching her, and every single one of them had known. That was the part that went into her like a nail. Not that he'd left her. Men left. Her own father had left, and her mother's second husband had left, and Eleanor had spent 19 years of her life learning how to keep a house running after a man walked out of it. She knew how to survive being left. But this, a whole town standing around with the truth in their mouths, watching a fool woman step off a train with her hair fixed nice. "How long," she said, "have they known I was coming?" The old man didn't answer. "Sir, how long?" Caldwell talked about it some, before. He coughed. "Fella at the Mercantile had a wager going on whether you'd come at all." Eleanor closed her eyes. "And did he win?" "Ma'am." "The man with the wager. Did he win his money?" "I reckon he did." "Good," Eleanor said. "Somebody ought to get something out of today." She bent down and picked up her suitcase. She set the letter inside it, on top of her folded gray dress, and she closed the latch, and she did all of it carefully, because if she did any one thing quickly, she was going to come apart in front of strangers, and she would not give them that. Not for free. Then she straightened up and said, "Where is the hotel?" The old man's face changed. "Ma'am, I'd think on that." "I asked where it was, not whether I ought to go." He pointed. "End of the street. Widow Pruitt keeps it." He hesitated. "Miss Whitmore, it ain't my place." "You're right," Eleanor said, not unkindly. "It ain't." She walked the length of that street with her chin level and her back straight, and she counted her steps because counting was something to do with a mind that wanted very badly to do something else. 2 women stopped talking as she passed. She heard the silence close behind her like a door. At the Mercantile, a man leaned in the doorway with his thumbs in his belt and said loud enough to carry, "That's her." "That's who?" "Caldwell's mail order. Come all the way from Kansas." Somebody laughed. It was not a cruel laugh. That was somehow worse. It was the easy laugh of a man watching something small and funny happen to somebody who wasn't him. Eleanor did not turn her head. "Keep walking," she told herself. "You have walked farther than this on less." The hotel had a bell over the door, and a woman behind the desk with iron gray hair pinned so tight it pulled at her temples. She looked up. She looked Eleanor over from her hat to her boots, and Eleanor watched the arithmetic happen in her face and knew the answer before the woman opened her mouth. "We're full." "You have a board out front says rooms available." "Board's old." Eleanor set the suitcase down. "Ma'am, I have $5. I'll take the smallest room you have for 2 nights, and I'll pay you now." "I said we're full." "You said the board was old. Which is it?" Widow Pruitt's chin came up. "I run a respectable house." And there it was. Eleanor stood very still. When she spoke, her voice was gentle, and that gentleness cost her more than shouting would have. "You believe I'm not respectable. I believe a woman who travels alone to meet a man she's never laid eyes on has made her own bed." "I've never laid eyes on him," Eleanor agreed. "That's true. I've got 16 letters in that case with his name signed at the bottom of every one. He wrote about the church he attended. He wrote about his mother's grave. He wrote that he was not a rich man, but he was a man who kept his word." She paused. "Would you like to read them, ma'am? I'd be pleased to have somebody else read them. I've read them near to pieces." Widow Pruitt's mouth thinned. "I can't have it," she said. "The talk, you understand. I understand you'd rather I sleep in the road than have women talk about you at church." "Now that is what it is," Eleanor said. "I've been in this town 20 minutes, and I have already learned more about it than I learned about Thomas Caldwell in 6 months. That's a hard thing to say about a place." She picked up her suitcase. At the door, she stopped and looked back. "Ma'am, did you go to the supper?" Widow Pruitt did not answer. "That's all right," Eleanor said. "Everybody did." She sat down on a bench outside the depot because there was nowhere else in the world for her to sit. She opened the suitcase on her knees. She counted the money. $5.40 and a train ticket stub that was worth nothing, and a tin comb and 2 dresses and a Bible with her mother's name in the front and 16 letters. $5.40. The train that had brought her would not come back through until Thursday. A ticket back to Kansas was $11, and she did not have $11, and she did not have anyone in Kansas to go back to, and both of those facts sat down on the bench beside her. You were 31 years old, and you believed a man, she thought. That's the whole crime. That's the entire foolishness of it. She thought about her sister's house, and her sister's husband, who did not like her, and the little room off the kitchen where she had slept for 4 years, cooking for a family that was not hers, and rocking babies that were not hers. She thought, "At least there they knew my name." And her eyes stung, and she pressed the heel of her hand hard against them once and made it stop. That was when the boots came up the boards behind her. "Well," a man said, "ain't you a sight?" Eleanor closed the suitcase. He was young and clean, and wore a badge that had not been polished lately, and he had the walk of a man who had never in his life been told no by anybody who mattered. "Deputy Ross Harlow," he said, and tipped his hat about half as far as a hat ought to go. "You'd be the Kansas woman." "I'd be Miss Whitmore." "Sure." He hooked a thumb in his belt. "Here's the trouble, ma'am. We got an ordinance in this town about vagrancy. Person with no lodging and no means sitting on public property after dark. That's a matter for the county." Eleanor looked up at him. "I've been here an hour." "Ordinance don't count hours." "I have money." "How much?" "That's my business." "It's the county's business," he said, "if it's under $10. Eleanor felt it then, the thing she had been holding down all afternoon, coming up hot through her chest. She held it. She held it the way you hold a horse that wants to run. "Deputy," she said. "Harlow, is that right?" "That's right." "The woman Thomas Caldwell married, what was her name before?" The deputy's smile stayed exactly where it was, but something behind it moved. "That'd be my sister." "Ah," Eleanor said. "Meaning nothing." "Meaning nothing at all," Eleanor agreed. "Except that you'd be the man come to run me out of town before I can open my mouth in it." "Ma'am, I'd advise you to watch how you talk today. Deputy." The voice came from behind them both. It was not loud. It did not have to be. Eleanor turned. The man standing there was big through the shoulders, in the way that comes from work and not from anything else. Dark hair, too long beard, gone rough dust on him to the knee. He had a hat in his hand, which she noticed because the deputy had never taken his off. "Blackwood Ross Harlow," said, and the word came out flat. "Ross. This ain't your business." "No," the big man agreed. "It ain't." He turned to Eleanor, and he did the thing then that she would remember for the rest of her life. He inclined his head to her, the way a man does to a woman in a church house, and he said, "Ma'am, don't sit alone, miss. Not on this street. Not tonight." Eleanor's hands tightened on the suitcase. I'm all right where I am. No, ma'am, he said. You ain't. But I'd not argue it with you in front of company. Blackwood, the deputy said. I got an ordinance to enforce. You got an ordinance you ain't enforced one time in 4 years, the big man said. Tom Sykes sleeps behind the livery every Saturday of his life, and you step over him to get to church. Sykes ain't what? The deputy's jaw worked. Say it, the big man said, still quiet. Go on and say what Sykes ain't. He's a man, Ross Harlow snapped. He ain't standing in the middle of the street embarrassing decent people. There was a silence. Eleanor stood up. She was not a tall woman, and she knew it, and she stood up anyway. Deputy Harlow, she said. I want to be certain I understand. It's not that I've broken a law. It's that my face is inconvenient to your family. That ain't. Because I'd like to write that down, Eleanor said. I keep good records. I always have. It's the one thing I'm truly gifted at. She opened her suitcase, took out a small bound notebook and a pencil stub, and she wrote out loud as she went. Deputy Ross Harlow, brother-in-law to Thomas Caldwell. Ordered a woman off a public bench 1 hour after her arrival, no charge filed. The deputy stared at her. What in the hell are you doing? Writing it down, Eleanor said, and closed the book. You'd be surprised how often that matters later. Somebody somewhere down the street laughed, and this time it was not at her. Ross Harlow's face went red to the ears. Sundown, he said. You be off this street by sundown, or I'll put you in a cell for your own protection. You'll put your hands on her, the big man said, and you'll answer to me for it. And he stepped forward. 1 step. That was all. He did not raise a hand, and he did not raise his voice, and he stepped 1 time between the deputy and the woman on the bench, and the deputy stopped talking. Nathan, Ross Harlow said, and it came out thinner. You want to think real careful about which side of a thing you stand on this year. I've thought on it. Have you? I have. Nathan Blackwood set his hat back on his head. Sundown's in 2 hours. She'll be gone off this street inside of 1. You've got no cause to come back. The deputy looked at Eleanor for a long moment. You'd have done better, he said, to stay on the train. I've been told that, Eleanor said, by a man who watched me get off it and didn't say a word. He went. She sat back down because her legs had decided the matter for her. Nathan Blackwood did not sit. He stood a respectful distance off with his hands loose at his sides and waited until her breathing came back level, and Eleanor understood dimly that he was giving her time, and that he was doing it without making a show of giving her time, and that no man had ever done that for her before. I don't need charity, she said. Didn't offer any. You were about to. No, ma'am. He looked out toward the mountains. I was about to offer you a job. Eleanor laughed. It came out of her wrong, cracked in the middle, and she put her hand over her mouth. Forgive me. Nothing to forgive. It's only that I've had a great deal of news today. I'd imagine so. She lowered her hand. What kind of job? Cookhouse and books. Books. Ledgers. He said the word like it tasted bad. Accounts. Tallies. I got 4 years of paper in a crate, and I can't make head nor tail of any of it, and every spring the bank tells me a different number than the one I've got, and every spring I believe them, because I can't prove otherwise. Eleanor went still. You keep no ledger. I keep a ledger, Nathan said. It just ain't a good one. How bad? Ma'am, I couldn't rightly say. That's the whole trouble. Eleanor looked at him, then really looked for the first time, past the shoulders and the beard and the dust. There was something behind his eyes she recognized, and she recognized it because she had been carrying the same thing on the train for 7 days. It was the look of a person who has already lost the main thing and is just tending what's left. What are the wages, she said. Room board and $12 the month. 15. Nathan blinked. 15. Eleanor repeated. And it's written down both our names on it, and either of us can end it with a week's notice and no hard words. Ma'am, you don't know what the work is yet. I know what 4 years of unsorted paper is, Eleanor said. I've done my sister's husband's books for 4 years, and he never once thanked me and never once paid me. $12 is what a man pays a woman he thinks is desperate. 15 is what he pays one who can do the work. Nathan Blackwood was quiet for a moment. Then he said, 15. And it's written. It's written. And Mr. Blackwood. Eleanor stood, and she made herself say the rest of it, because saying it now was cheaper than finding out later. I want to be plain with you. I came here to marry a man. That's the truth, and this whole town knows it, and there's no use pretending otherwise. But I am not looking for another one. Not this year, and maybe not any year. If that's part of what's on offer, I'd rather sleep in the road and keep my own name. He took his hat off again. Miss Whitmore, he said. I buried my wife 6 years ago in July, and my boy 11 days after her, and I have not once in 6 years thought about what you're describing. Not once. Eleanor's throat closed. I'm sorry, she said. That was unkind of me. No, ma'am, that was careful of you. He put the hat back on. A woman in your position ought to be careful. Ain't nobody else out here going to be careful on your behalf. The ride out took better than an hour, and neither of them said much for the first half of it. Then Eleanor said, May I ask you something, Mr. Blackwood? Nathan's fine. May I ask you something, Mr. Blackwood? He almost smiled. She saw the corner of it. Ask. Why did you come to that station? Come in for salt and nails. That's not what I asked. No, he allowed. It ain't. He worked the reins a while. Fella at the mercantile was telling it, he said finally. About the wager, laughing over it. And I got to thinking about a woman on a train 7 days with her hair done nice and a whole town standing around holding the truth in its pocket. And I set down my nails, and I come down to the depot. He paused. That's the entire why. Ain't a noble reason in it. It sounds like a noble reason to me. It's a plain one, Nathan said. There's a difference. Eleanor watched her own hands in her lap. They all knew, she said. They did. 6 months of letters, and 100 people knew before I did. Yes'm. Do you know, Eleanor said, the thing I can't get past. It isn't him. I've had 4 hours to look at him plain, and he's a small man, and small men do small things. It's them. Her voice did not rise. It went the other direction, down and flat. It's that not one soul in that town thought I was worth a 2-cent letter. Not one. They watched a woman spend her last dollar to come to them, and they made a game of it. Nathan did not tell her she was wrong. He did not tell her they weren't so bad, or that folks meant well, or any of the 100 soft lies she had braced herself against. He said, that's the truest thing anybody's said out loud in that town in 10 years. And Eleanor Whitmore, who had not cried on the platform, or at the hotel, or in front of the deputy, put her hand over her face and cried in the back of a wagon for about 90 seconds hard and ugly, and then stopped and wiped her face with her sleeve and said, Well, ma'am. That's done, she said. That's the last of it. Ain't nothing wrong with more. There's a great deal wrong with more, Eleanor said. More is how you drown. There was an old man waiting for them, and he did not like her, and he did not pretend to. Cormac. That a woman. It is. In my wagon. It's my wagon. That, said Cormac Byrne, is a matter of opinion. He looked at Eleanor with one eye squinted nearly shut. Ma'am. Sir. Cormac's run this place since before I could ride, Nathan said. Miss Whitmore's come to take the books off me. Cormac's whole face went sideways. The books. The books. Nate, son. The old man took him by the elbow and walked him 4 steps off and did not lower his voice near enough. You brought home the Caldwell woman. She ain't the Caldwell woman. Half the county says. Half the county was at the supper, Nathan said, and I don't much care what it says. That's the trouble with you, Cormac hissed. You never have. Eleanor climbed down from the wagon by herself and set her suitcase down and said loud enough to carry, Mr. Byrne. The old man turned. I'll spare you the walk, she said. You're going to spend the next 2 weeks waiting for me to steal something. So let's shorten it. Every Sunday I'll set the books on that table, and you may go through them line by line, and if $1's out of place, You may throw me off this mountain yourself." Cormac stared at her. "Every Sunday," he said. "Every Sunday." "And if I can't read a ledger?" "Then I'll teach you," Eleanor said, "and you'll like me even less." There was a long, dangerous pause. Then Cormac Byrne made a noise that might have been a laugh being strangled at birth. "Supper's at 7, he said. "Don't touch my stove." There was a boy, too. 14 all elbows, name of Wesley, who had come to the place 2 winters back with nothing and had never quite gotten over the fact that somebody had let him stay. He carried her suitcase without being asked and then stood in the doorway, working up to something. "Miss?" "Yes." "Is it true you come 1,000 miles?" "Near enough." "For a fella?" "For a fella." Eleanor agreed. Wesley considered this with tremendous seriousness. "That's a lot of miles," he said, "for a fella." Eleanor laughed, a real one this time, surprised out of her, and the sound of it seemed to startle the both of them. "Yes," she said. "It surely was." She did not sleep. At some hour past 2, she gave it up and stood at the window with her arms crossed and thought about the ticket she could not afford, and the sister who would take her back and never once let her forget it, and the $5.40, and the way the deputy had said you'd have done better to stay on the train. You could walk, she thought. Take the road down before light. Nobody would stop you. And she knew standing there exactly what that would be. It would be the town winning. It would be Widow Pruitt telling it at church for the next 20 years. She came out here, and she couldn't hack it, and she went home. Eleanor Whitmore had been many things in her life. She had been overlooked and used and passed over and lied to. She had never once been run off. She heard the floorboard behind her and turned. Nathan stood at the far end of the hall with a lamp turned down low, and he stopped where he was and did not come a step closer. "Couldn't sleep neither," he said. "No." "Coffee's still hot. Cormac never lets it go cold. Says it's a sin." "Mr. Blackwood." "Ma'am?" "Why did you really hire me?" He was quiet. "Because the bank's fixing to take this place," he said. "Come spring." Eleanor's hands came apart. "What?" "Note come due in March. I've been paying on it 4 years, and the number don't go down." He said it evenly, the way a man says a thing he has said to himself 1,000 times in the dark. "Every year I hand over near everything I make, and every year they tell me I owe more than I did. And I can't read it, Miss Whitmore. I can read some. I can read a Bible slow. But I can't read that, and every man in that town knows I can't. And I have sat in that bank president's office with my hat in my hands like a fool, while he told me numbers, and I have signed what he put in front of me." Eleanor felt something go cold along her arms. "How much have you signed?" "I don't know." "Mr. Blackwood." "I don't know," he said. "That's what I'm telling you. That's the whole of what I'm telling you." She stood there a moment. Then she said, "Where is the crate?" "Ma'am, it's the middle of the night." "Where is the crate, Mr. Blackwood?" It took her until the gray of morning. She sorted it into piles on the floor because there was not table enough receipts. Here notes, there, tallies of head sold a lease, 3 years of bank statements, in a hand she did not like the look of. Cormac came in at some point, said nothing, and set a cup of coffee down beside her. She drank it without looking up. By the time the boy came through, she had it in order, and she had checked it twice, and the second checking had not made it better. Nathan came and stood in the doorway with his hat in his hands like a man at a graveside. "Well, well," he said. "Sit down." "I'd rather stand." "Sit down, Mr. Blackwood." He sat. Eleanor put her finger on the first pile. "You have not been paying down a loan," she said. "You have been paying interest on a loan that was refinanced 3 times without your understanding, and each time the fees were added to the principal, and each time you signed. Your original note was $1,100. You now owe $2,490. Nathan did not move. "That ain't possible." "It's not only possible," Eleanor said. "It's ordinary. It's the most ordinary swindle there is. It's how they take land from men who work with their hands." She moved her finger. "Second thing, 3 years back you signed a water lease you likely thought was a neighbor's courtesy. It isn't. It gives a third-party right of access to the creek above your east pasture, and it renews on its own unless you object in writing 60 days prior. You have never objected. You didn't know you could. Cormac, Nathan said hoarsely. Cormac, get in here. The old man came in. Third thing, Eleanor said, and her voice changed. Nathan looked up. Miss Whitmore. She was holding one page. She had gone very white. Miss Whitmore. The note, Eleanor said, was sold. Sold. Banks sell paper. It happens. Your note is no longer held by the bank in town. She wet her lips. It was purchased 4 months ago by a private party. Which means come March, you don't answer to the bank. You answer to whoever bought it. And they can call it all of it at once, and take the land in place of payment. Cormac swore. Who? Nathan said. Who bought it? Eleanor did not answer. Miss Whitmore. Who bought my note? She turned the page around and set it on the table facing him, and she put her finger under the line, and her hand was steady, and her voice was not. Harlow Land and Cattle Company, she said. Signed by the agent of record. Nathan stared at the signature. I can't. He stopped. His jaw went tight. Read it to me. Eleanor read it. Thomas J. Caldwell. The room did not make a sound. Wesley in the doorway looked from one face to the other and did not understand and knew better than to ask. Cormac sat down slowly on the edge of the bench. 4 months ago, Nathan said. 4 months ago. He was writing you 4 months ago. He was writing me 4 months ago, Eleanor said. Yes. She looked down at the paper and at the signature and at the loops of the letters she had traced with her thumb 16 times in a rocking train car, believing every word above them. He wrote me about his mother's grave, she said. He wrote me the name of the church. He asked what I liked to cook. Her voice went very quiet and very hard. And the whole time he was buying up this mountain one note at a time and marrying the family that owns the rest of it. Nathan Blackwood rose to his feet. Miss Whitmore, he said. I'm going to ask you a thing, and I want the truth of it. Ask. Did you know? She met his eyes. No. You'd say that either way. I would, Eleanor agreed. So don't take my word for it. She pushed the ledger across the table toward him. Take the paper. Every one of those 16 letters is in my case, and you may read them tonight, all of them, and Mr. Byrne may read them with you, and you'll find not one line about land, and not one line about this valley, and not one line about you. He never once mentioned your name to me. Her chin came up. But he mentioned mine to this town, didn't he? He told them I was coming. He let them lay money on it. Nathan looked at her a long moment. Then he pulled out the chair and sat back down heavy. That's why, he said. Why what? Why he brought you out here at all? Nathan's hands closed slowly on the edge of the table. He didn't need a wife. He had one picked out already, Harlow's girl and Harlow's money and Harlow's boy wearing a badge. He didn't need you. He looked up. He needed the town watching something else. Eleanor's breath went out of her. He needed a spectacle, Nathan said. A woman off a train. A joke to pass around the mercantile. Something folks would talk about all summer while he bought up half this mountain quiet as a cat. Cormac Byrne put his face in his hands. God above, the old man said. Nate. He used the poor woman for a distraction. Eleanor sat down. She had not meant to. Her legs simply arrived at the decision without her. 7 days on a train. 16 letters. $5.40. Not even hated. Not even wanted enough to be hated. Useful, she thought. I was useful. And then rising up under it slow and steady and hot as a stove coming up to heat. Well, he was right about that. She reached over and took the notebook out of her suitcase. She opened it flat on the table. She picked up her pencil. Mr. Blackwood. Ma'am? How many other men on this mountain can't read their own paper? Nathan lifted his head. Most of them, he said slowly. Damn near every last one. And how many of them have signed something in the last 4 years without knowing what it said? Cormac's head came up too. All of 'em, the old man said. Ma'am, every soul in this valley. Ott Bergen, the Slaughters, Old Man Pell and his boys. They all been to that bank. Eleanor wrote 3 lines in her notebook and underlined the last one twice. Then she looked up, and there was something in her face that had not been there on the platform, and Nathan Blackwood saw it happen. Then he's not stealing one ranch, Eleanor said. He's stealing a valley, and he's doing it the same way every time on paper in a hand I would know anywhere in this world. She closed the notebook. I came out here with $5 and a suitcase, and this town decided what I was worth before I'd said one word to any of them, she said. Fine. Let them keep on thinking it. A woman nobody watches can read every piece of paper in that county. Nathan looked at her for a long moment. Then he stood, and he took his hat off, and he held it against his chest, and he said, Miss Whitmore, I'll pay you the $15, and I'll pay you first out of anything this place makes, and if it comes to nothing at all, and they take the land in March, I'll still owe you the truth of what I've got, which is more than I had yesterday. That'll do, Eleanor said. And ma'am? Yes. That man made a joke of you in front of 100 people. Nathan Blackwood's voice went low. He is going to find out he made a mistake. Eleanor Whitmore picked up her pencil. He already has, she said. He just don't know it yet. The pencil was still in Eleanor's hand when Wesley brought her a second cup of coffee at 7:30, and the notebook had 4 more pages filled, and the pile on the floor had grown 2 new stacks. She had not slept. She did not feel the lack of it. She felt instead the particular alertness that comes when a mind has found the thing it was built for. The way a hunting dog goes still and bright-eyed at the edge of a field. The numbers were talking to her. They had been talking all night, and she had been listening, and what they were saying was not good, and she wanted every word of it down before the clarity wore off. Nathan came through the kitchen door at 7:06. She knew it was him by the weight of the step. Cormac came soft and quick for an old man, and the boy came like everything was on fire. Nathan came like a man who had somewhere to be and was not going to be hurried into getting there. She had learned that much in one night. You eat, he said. Cormac left biscuits. Did you eat them? I was going to. They're cold, Mr. Blackwood, Eleanor said without looking up. Did Thomas Caldwell ever come to this ranch? She heard him stop. Once, he said, spring of last year, said he was looking to buy some of my breeding stock. Did you sell him any? No, prices weren't right. He wasn't there for the stock. Eleanor turned the page she was holding to face him. Look at the date on this water survey. Nathan crossed the room and looked. He was quiet a moment. That's the week after he came. That's the week after he came, Eleanor agreed. Somebody walked your eastern creek and measured it. The survey is in your own file, Mr. Blackwood. Somebody left it there knowing you'd never read it. It estimates 300 acres on the far side of that creek as highly suitable for rail depot development, and it has a land office stamp on it, which means it was filed officially, which means it is public record, which means Thomas Caldwell already knows exactly what your land is worth, and you do not. Nathan put both hands on the edge of the table and looked at the paper. Rail depot, he said. The Wyoming Central is pushing a line north. I read about it in a paper on the train. The route hasn't been announced yet, but there are 3 possible corridors. Eleanor touched the survey with one finger. Your eastern creek sits in the middle of one of them. Cormac came in from the back and stopped. Coffee, he said to no one in particular, and poured himself a cup, and stood there holding it, and said nothing, because he was old enough to know when a room already had enough talking going on. How much? Nathan said. Rail depot land. What does it go for? 10-15 times what you paid for it. Maybe more, depending on who wants it. Eleanor folded her hands on the notebook. Your original deed was for 1,200 acres at 60 cents the acre. At 15 times that value, we are speaking about a piece of land worth over $10,000. Possibly significantly more once a route is announced. The kitchen was very quiet. And he's buying my note, Nathan said. So when March comes, he calls the note. You can't pay $2,400 in a week, and he takes the deed in settlement. Eleanor's voice stayed level. At which point he owns for approximately $2,000 a parcel of land that a railroad will pay him $10,000 or better to run track across. Son, Cormac said to his coffee cup. Son, son, son. How long has he been planning this? Nathan said. I can't know exactly, but the survey is dated 14 months ago, and he wrote his first letter to me 16 months ago. Eleanor let that sit a moment. I don't think it was an accident, the timing. He needed 18 months because he needed time to buy the right notes, marry the right family, put the right man in the deputy's chair. She paused. And he needed a story to keep this town looking somewhere else while he did it. Nathan straightened up. You, he said. Me, Eleanor said. The Kansas woman. The mail-order fool. Something everybody could laugh at from October clear through to March, right up until the day the note comes due, and it's done, and the land is already signed over, and there's nothing left to do. God above, Cormac said again. He's been doing it to others, Eleanor said. That's the thing you need to understand. Ott Bergen, the Slaughters, Old Man Pell. Every one of them has been to that bank in the last 4 years, and every one of them is likely sitting on a note. They can't read with numbers that don't make sense, and a water lease they signed without knowing what it did. She looked at Nathan steadily. He is not stealing a ranch. He is buying a valley piece by piece, and he is buying it from men who work 16 hours a day, and trust paper they can't parse because they have no choice but to trust it. Nathan Blackwood was still. When he got like that, Eleanor was already beginning to learn it. It did not mean he was doing nothing. It meant everything in him was going in one direction. We go to Bergen first, he said. I need 1 more day with your file. Why? Because when I walk into Ott Bergen's kitchen and tell him his note was sold to the man who married into the Harlow family, I need to have your numbers right. I need to show him mine first, so he knows I know what I'm reading, so he doesn't throw me out of his house before I get to the second page. Nathan looked at her. He might anyway. He might, Eleanor allowed. But he won't throw me out twice. Something crossed Nathan's face. Then, not a smile exactly, but the structural components of one. Eat the biscuits, he said. I'll get the wagon. She did eat them cold, standing over the sink, and Wesley came and stood beside her with his hat turning in his hands the way he did when he had something to say, and wasn't certain it was welcome. You can ask, Eleanor said. How'd you learn all of it? He said. The numbers and such. My mother's brother was a bookkeeper. He taught me young. She drank the last of the cold coffee. And then I kept my sister's house for 4 years, and her husband thought I was only cooking and cleaning, and I was also fixing every mistake he made with money, without telling him, because if I'd told him, he would have had to thank me. Why didn't he thank you? Because then he would have had to admit he needed it. She set the cup down. Proud men are like that. They'd rather have the house fall down than admit a woman saw it leaning. Wesley thought about this with tremendous seriousness. Nate ain't like that, he said. No, Eleanor said. He's not. He asked Cormac to teach him to read better, last winter. Cormac told him he was too old to be tutored, and Nate said he didn't care. They sat at this table 3 nights a week with a lamp and an almanac. Eleanor looked at the boy. Why are you telling me that? Wesley shrugged with his whole skinny body. I don't know. Thought you ought to know the kind of man you're working for. He put his hat on. Cormac says the devil you know is better. I think the man who practices something hard in private, when nobody's watching, is better than a man who already knows everything. He went out the door. Eleanor stood in the kitchen a moment, and then she picked up her notebook, and she thought, well, a 14-year-old just told me something true. Bergen's place was 7 miles southeast, and they found Ott Bergen splitting wood behind his barn, a thick-shouldered Norwegian who had come to Wyoming 20 years back and built his ranch with his own hands, and 3 sons, who all had his same wide forehead and his same distrust of strangers. Nathan stepped down from the wagon, and Bergen nodded at him and looked at Eleanor and did not say a word. Ott, Nathan said. This is Miss Whitmore. She's been going over my paper. Your paper, Bergen said, and went back to splitting. OTT. Nathan, I don't got time today. I know it. Give me 10 minutes. What for? Because she found something in my files, and it's got your name near it, and if I was you, I'd want to know." The axe came down clean and hard. Bergen looked up. "What kind of something?" Nathan looked at Eleanor. She stepped down from the wagon herself, and she did not wait to be handed down, and Bergen watched that. "Mr. Bergen," she said, "when did you last sit with your bank paper?" "Ma'am, I don't see how that's—" "The Cattlemen's Savings and Trust," Eleanor said. "In town. Do you have a note with them?" The three sons had materialized from somewhere, the barn behind the fence, one from a field. They were there the way large objects are suddenly there without any visible process of arriving. Bergen's jaw shifted. "I got a note," he said. "Same as every man. When you signed it, what was the rate? 7%. And now is—" He stopped. "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking whether your rate changed and whether anybody told you before it changed or after." Bergen set the axe down. The biggest son, tall, red in the face, going for his father's width, but not there yet, stepped forward. "Papa," he said, "who is this woman?" "She works for Blackwood," Bergen said. Not to the son, to Eleanor. The answer was for Eleanor. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore," she said. "I came to this territory 6 days ago to marry a man who'd already married somebody else. And I ended up on Mr. Blackwood's mountain with a crate of paper that told me things that man didn't want told. And Mr. Bergen, 2 of those things have your name on them, and they are not good things, and I think you ought to read them." Complete silence. Even the sons were still. Bergen picked up the axe and walked over to the fence and hung it on a peg, as deliberate as a man setting down a loaded rifle. "Come inside," he said. His wife was small and quick, and put coffee on before Eleanor had her notebook open, which was the most useful thing that happened in the first 5 minutes, because what came after was not easy. The rate change had happened 18 months ago. Bergen had signed a modification letter, a single page, written dense, that increased his rate from 7% to 9.5%. Reset the term clock back to the beginning and added a clause, allowing the note holder to call the full balance due if the property fell below a certain assessed value. The assessed value threshold had been set very carefully just above what the county office would give Bergen's land on a bad year, which meant Thomas Caldwell, or the Harlow Land and Cattle Company, could call that note almost any time they chose. Bergen's wife said something sharp and short in Norwegian. Bergen held the paper and did not put it down. "I signed this," he said. "You did," Eleanor said. "It was your signature." "The man at the bank said it was. He said it was a standard renewal." "It was not a standard renewal." "I couldn't—" Bergen's jaw worked. I can read enough. But the law language, it was designed to read like a standard renewal," Eleanor said, and kept every softness she had in her voice for it. "That's the whole point, Mr. Bergen. It's meant to look ordinary. This is a man who does this for a living. He has done it before. He knows exactly which words to put where, so that a working man who reads well enough for everyday life will still miss the clause that matters." Bergen set the paper down flat and pressed his palm on it. "Who?" he said. "The note was sold," Eleanor said. "Same as Mr. Blackwood's." "Who bought it?" Eleanor told him. Bergen's wife set down her cup very carefully, the way women do when they're deciding not to throw it. "Caldwell," Bergen said. "The Harlow Company. But Caldwell is the agent of record." Bergen looked at Nathan. "You knew," he said. "Found out this morning," Nathan said. "Same as you." "How many others?" "That's what we're going to find out," Eleanor said. "If you'll let me look at your file." Bergen was quiet a long time. Then he said to his wife something low in Norwegian, and she looked at Eleanor with an expression that Eleanor could not read entirely, but recognized in part. It was the look of a woman taking the measure of another woman deciding something. "The paper is in the trunk," Bergen's wife said. "I'll get it." The slaughter place was 11 miles west. By the time they got there, the sun was deep in the afternoon, and Nathan was driving with his hat pulled low and not saying much, which Eleanor had already learned meant his mind was full and working. "You're adding them up," she said. "I'm trying." "Don't try to add them up yet. We need all the names first. I know it. He turned the reins in his hands. It's not the numbers I'm adding. It's the shape of it. He came out here 2 years ago, and everybody thought he was just another man looking to buy into cattle. And all the time he was looking at what you had, Eleanor said. What all of you had, and figuring out how to take it without ever once pointing a gun. That's worse, Nathan said. That is considerably worse than pointing a gun. Yes, because by the time you know it's happening, it's mostly done. Eleanor kept her eyes on the road. That's why he needed until March. Not because he had to. Because by March, every note in this valley will have been called, and every deed will be in his name, and every man who might have fought it will be too broke and too scattered to mount anything. Nathan looked sideways at her. How do you know so much about how this is done? Eleanor was quiet a moment. My sister's husband, she said. The one whose books I kept. He did something similar, smaller in Kansas. Twice. I watched him do it, and I didn't understand what I was watching until after, and by then it was 2 families ruined, and a man who lost his father's farm. She paused. That's why I knew what I was looking at in your crate. I recognized the handwriting. Not Caldwell's. The method. The shape of it. It has a shape. Nathan said nothing. I told myself, Eleanor said, that if I ever saw the shape again, I would call it by its name. And here you are, Nathan said. And here I am. She meant it matter-of-factly. He heard it as something else, and did not say so. The Slaughter boys were 3 of them, all grown, all big, and their father had died the previous winter and left them the land, and a note they'd never looked at because there had been too much else to do. The eldest one, Marcus 20, with his father's name for cattle and his mother's caution. Read the page Eleanor put in front of him twice over, slow moving his lips a little, and then looked up. How bad, he said. The note was sold 8 months ago, Eleanor said. The rate is 9.5. There is a clause that allows immediate call under conditions of quote. She found the line, material diminishment of asset value, or at the discretion of the note holder in the event of administrative restructuring. What does administrative restructuring mean? It means anything the note holder decides it means, Eleanor said, which in practical terms means whenever he wants. Marcus Slaughter put the paper down. Ben, he said to the middle brother, get me the box from Mama's room. Ben went. We got a letter 3 months back, Marcus said, about a property assessment. I didn't pay it much mind. Papa's things were still... He stopped. There was a lot going on. Let me see the letter, Eleanor said. It was a county assessment notice routine, requesting access to the property for purposes of reevaluation. Marcus had written the date on his calendar and then not kept the appointment because a horse had broken a leg that week and he'd forgotten. The notice said that if no representative of the property was present for the assessment, the county agent would proceed on the basis of comparable properties. Eleanor stared at it. What? Nathan said, reading her face. If the assessment came back low. She held the paper up. Marcus, did anyone come out here to assess? Did a county man come? I told you we weren't home. Did anyone come? He frowned. My mother thought she saw a man ride by the east fence that week, but there's a road there, so a man who rides along the fence line of a property he is assessing as low as possible is not going to knock on the front door, Eleanor said. He is going to ride the fence, make his notes, and leave. She set the paper down. If the county reassessment came back low, Caldwell now has legal grounds to call your note anytime he wants. Your land assessed below the threshold in the modification clause. Marcus was on his feet. He can't do that. We've run 500 head on this land. It's worth what the county says it's worth, Eleanor said. That's the law. And the county assessor's records are public, and I'd like very much to see them, but I can't see them until I get to town. And to get to town, I need to know how many names are on this list because I am walking into that courthouse with all of them or none of them. How many others? Marcus said. We don't know yet. How many others do you think? Eleanor looked at him straight. I think he's been buying notes for 2 years. I think he started with the smallest ranches and worked up. I think there may be 8 or 10 families in this valley who are all standing on the same ground you're standing on right now and don't know it yet." She paused. "But what I think doesn't matter. What's on the paper matters." Marcus Slaughter turned to his brothers, and there was a whole conversation in the turning that used no words at all. "Breakfast," he said. "Tomorrow morning, 5 o'clock. Tell Ott Bergen." "You don't have to," Eleanor began. "Ma'am." Marcus picked up his hat. "My father built this place from nothing. He broke his back on this land for 30 years, and he put my mother in a house on it that she never had to leave, and she died in it last March happy, because he kept his word." His voice was flat and certain the way the land outside was flat and certain. "I will not be the man who lost it to a banker in a suit before the ground had settled on her grave." Eleanor closed her notebook. 5 o'clock, she said. "Chete." It was full dark by the time they made it back to the mountain. Cormac had supper held and waited until they were seated and fed before he asked, because he had the sense to know that news delivered on an empty stomach always sounds worse than news delivered on a full one. Nathan told it plain. The old man listened without interrupting, which cost him something Eleanor could tell. When Nathan finished, Cormac poured himself a whiskey, just one just enough, and set the glass down. "He used her," he said. "He used the girl to cover it." "He used the girl," Nathan said. Cormac looked at Eleanor. "Miss," he said, and there was something different in it than the way he'd said it before. "I'd like to apologize to you." Eleanor shook her head. "You didn't know." "I was rude." "You were careful. There's a difference." She pushed the last of the bread toward him. "I would have been careful too." "That's generous." "It's practical," Eleanor said. "I'm going to need every person on this mountain thinking clearly in the same direction, and I don't have time for you to carry around the weight of having been rude to me." Cormac stared at her. Then he said to Nathan, "Where'd you find her?" "Train station." "We should put a sign up," the old man said, "in case any more come." Wesley had already taken himself to bed when Nathan came out to the porch later and found Eleanor there with her notebook and what was left of the lamp oil. "You need to sleep," he said. "I will." "You said that this morning." "I'll sleep when I know the whole shape of it." He leaned in the doorway and did not tell her again. "Tomorrow," Eleanor said without looking up. "After Bergen's, I need to get into the land records at the courthouse. Not the bank. The county land office. Because if I'm right about the assessments, there will be a trail, and that trail will not be in a private bank file that nobody but Caldwell can touch. It'll be in a public ledger, and a public ledger can be read by anybody." "By anybody," Eleanor confirmed. "And copied. And used." "The clerk in that office," Nathan said. "He's on good terms with the deputy." "I'd imagine so." "He might not let you in." "He has to." Eleanor finally looked up. "It's a public record. That's the whole beauty of it. The only reason this has worked for 2 years is that nobody went and looked. The paper is all right there. The whole story sitting in a county office that every citizen has a legal right to enter." She closed the notebook. "He built his scheme on public record because public record is the last place a working rancher has the time or the reading to look. But I have the time, and I can read it." Nathan was quiet. "Miss Whitmore," he said. "Eleanor," she said, and was surprised by her own mouth. She had not offered that to anyone in a long time. He let it rest a moment. "Eleanor," he said, "what happens when he finds out you're looking?" She had been thinking about that since Bergen's kitchen. "He finds out either way," she said. "We can be quiet about it for maybe another week before somebody talks. A week is what we have. And after a week he is going to come at this from the other side," Eleanor said. "He's going to come at me. My reputation, my reasons for being here, whatever he can find or make up." She said it without drama, because it was not a dramatic thing. It was a practical thing, the same as weather. "He was ready to do that the minute I stepped off that train. He just thought I'd leave before he had to bother." Nathan pushed off the doorframe. "He's going to find," he said quietly, "that leaving ain't something you're much inclined toward." Eleanor looked at him. He looked back. And somewhere in that exchange, not romantic, not yet nothing so simple as that, something was decided. She could not have said what exactly. Only that 2 days ago, she had been nobody to him, and she was not nobody now, and it was not because he had rescued her, and it was not because she had rescued him. It was because they had sat in a kitchen at 3 in the morning and looked at the same ugly truth together, and neither of them had flinched. That was the only honest beginning she had ever known. "Good night, Mr. Blackwood," she said. "Good night, Eleanor." She woke 2 hours before the rest of the house and went through Bergen's file by the gray pre-light that came through the kitchen window, and she added a full page of notes to her book, and when Cormac came in for the fire, he found her sitting straight with the pencil still moving and did not say a word about sleep. He just put the coffee on, and that was when the sound of a horse came fast up the road. Too fast for morning, too fast for anything good. And Cormac went to the window, and Nathan was already in the doorway in his boots and his shirt untucked, and the boy skidded his horse to a stop in the yard. Not Wesley, but Pell's youngest, barely 12, with his eyes white all around. "Mr. Blackwood," the boy shouted. "My daddy says come. He says come right now." "What's wrong?" Nathan called down. "Man came last night," the boy said. "2 men. They come to the house and they say they're from the county. They say the note's been called." His voice cracked. "They put a paper on the door, sir. They put it on the door, and my mama's crying, and my daddy says the deadline on it is—" He pulled a breath. "The deadline on it says 30 days. Eleanor was on her feet. She crossed the kitchen in 3 strides and got to the door behind Nathan and said, "The paper on the door. Did your father keep it?" "Yes'm." "Good boy, Nathan." "I heard," Nathan said, already moving for his coat. "He's starting early," Eleanor said. "He knows something. Someone talked faster than we thought. Or he had this planned before yesterday. Either way." She was already back at the table, her notebook, her files. "Get to Pell. I need Bergen and Slaughter at Pell's place by 10 o'clock. Send Wesley to Bergen tonight." "You're not coming." "I need 1 more hour with this paper," Eleanor said. "I'll ride down after." Nathan stopped with his coat half on. "You can ride. I can ride well enough. I got a horse that won't fight you for it." "Then go," she said. "Go now. And Nathan." He was already out the door. "Don't let Pell burn that paper," she called. His voice came back from the dark. "He'd best not try." Eleanor sat back down. Her hand was steady. Her mind was already 3 steps ahead, moving through the thing, the way a river moves through what's in its way, not around it, not over it. Through. The lamp was almost out of oil. She tilted it and kept writing. 30 days, she thought. He thinks 30 days is enough to scatter us. She underlined the last line in her notes so hard, the pencil scored the page beneath. He has not met us yet. Eleanor rode into Pell's yard at 9:47, and she knew before she got off the horse that something had already gone wrong. The men were all there. Nathan Bergen, the 3 Slaughter boys, old Pell himself, standing on his porch with his arms crossed, and his face the color of a man who has not slept and has been angry the whole time he was awake. But they were not talking to each other. They were standing in separate places in the yard, the way men stand when they have just had an argument and have not finished it. Nathan came to take her horse without being asked. "What happened?" she said quietly. "Pell wants to pay." "Pay what? He doesn't have—" "He knows he doesn't have it. He wants to go to Bergen and borrow it." Eleanor looked across the yard at Ott Bergen, who was looking at the fence. And Bergen said no. Bergen said no. She handed over the reins and walked straight to the porch and looked up at Pell, who was 71 years old, and had the kind of face that is made by 30 years of sun and wind, and making hard decisions with no good options. "Mr. Pell," she said, "I understand what you're thinking." "Do you?" "You're thinking that if you can just pay this note off right now today, then whatever else happens to these other men, your family is clear. Your land is yours. Your children are safe." Pell looked down at her. "That's right," he said. "That's exactly right. And I'm telling you it won't work. Miss Whitmore, with all due respect, if you pay this note, Thomas Caldwell has your money and your deed," Eleanor said. "Not your land, your deed. Because the deed is the next thing he goes for. He doesn't need your note anymore if you pay it off. He's got the county assessor in his pocket, and the minute your land reassesses below the threshold for the adjacent parcels, which it will, because he has already begun arranging that he will file a claim disputing your title on the grounds that the land was improperly valued at purchase. He will use the same county office, the same clerk, the same public record he's been using this whole time, and he will tie you up in territorial court for 3 years while you spend every dollar you have on a lawyer. She paused. Your money and your deed. That is what paying him gets you. Pell stared at her. You don't know that, he said. Mr. Pell, I have seen this done before. Eleanor kept her voice even and her eyes on his. Not here, in Kansas. I watched a man lose his father's farm the same way, and he did exactly what you're about to do, and it cost him everything twice. Silence in the yard. Bergen turned away from the fence. Marcus Slaughter crossed his arms. Pell looked at the paper in his hand. The one that had been nailed to his door in the dark. 30 days, he said. 30 days, Eleanor agreed. Which is exactly enough time for us to get to the county land office and pull every public record filed in this valley in the last 2 years. The assessments, the note transfers, the water surveys, all of it. And when we have them, we are going to take them to the Territorial Land Commissioner's office in Cheyenne, and we are going to show a federal officer the pattern. Pattern, Pell said. A pattern is something one bad assessment can't explain. A pattern is what you get when you line up 8 families in a row and show that every one of them received a county assessment notice in the same 6-month window. Every one of them had a note sold to the same private party, and every one of those notes now contains the same modification clause in the same legal language. Eleanor pulled her notebook from her coat. I have 3 families documented already. I need the rest. I need your paper, and I need it today. Pell was quiet a long moment. You got it wrong, he said. Earlier. What I was thinking. Sir. It weren't my children I was thinking of. His voice went rough. This place has my wife in the ground behind the house. 22 years she's been there. I built the fence around her plot myself. He stopped. I cannot have a stranger own the land my wife is buried on. That is the only thought I've got. Eleanor held very still. Then she said, Then help me make sure that doesn't happen. Pell handed her the paper from the door. She worked at Pell's kitchen table for 2 hours straight while the men talked outside, and she could hear them through the window. First, the low, careful kind of talking, then the louder kind, then the very quiet kind that meant something had been decided. Nathan came in at noon. 7 families, he said. Eleanor's pencil stopped. You found more. Pell knows 2 more that I don't. Small outfits east side. Man named Greeley and a widow named Foss who's been running her late husband's place for the last 3 years by herself. A widow, Eleanor said. Yes'm. She thought about that. She's the most vulnerable one on the list, Eleanor said. A woman with no husband running land alone. He can go after her title directly, and nobody in that courthouse is going to look twice at it. I know it. We need her paper more than anybody else's. I know that too. I've already sent Wesley. Eleanor looked up. Nathan was leaning in the doorway with his arms crossed, and he had the look on his face that she was coming to recognize. Not calm exactly, but the disciplined cousin of calm. The look of a man who is afraid and has put it somewhere useful. 7 families, she said. 7. How many acres total? Between the 7. He worked it in his head. Close to 8,000 acres. At rail depot value. Nathan's jaw shifted. At rail depot value. Yeah. Eleanor set her pencil down and pressed both hands flat on the table and looked at them for a moment. He's not buying a valley, she said. He's buying a county. Eleanor, he's going to own more of this territory than the territorial government does, she said. He gets these 8,000 acres plus the railroad contract, and there is not a judge or a marshal or a commissioner in Wyoming who will cross him. Not one. She picked the pencil back up. We have less than 30 days, and he already knows we're looking. We're not going to get the whole 30. How long do you think we have? until he decides the quiet approach isn't fast enough. And then what does he do? Then, Eleanor said, he stops using paper. The silence after that had weight. I need to go to town, Eleanor said. Today, not tomorrow, today. The land office closes at 5. Ross Harlow is in that town. I know it. He will not let you into that courthouse quietly. Then we don't go quietly, Eleanor said. We take Bergen. We take Marcus Slaughter. We take every man who can ride, and we walk into that courthouse together, and I walk up to the clerk's window with a list of the specific record numbers I need, and I ask for them politely. And if he says no, I ask him to show me the statute that allows him to deny a citizen access to public record. And I write down his answer, and I write down his name, and I ask him whether he would like to make that answer in front of 8 men or before a territorial judge. Nathan was quiet. Then, you know the specific record numbers. I know the filing system, Eleanor said. I looked it up in the county registry at Bergen's. They use Halcombe notation. It's not complicated. I can pull every document I need in under an hour if the clerk doesn't fight me. And if he does, then it takes 2 hours. Something in Nathan's face shifted, a slow, quiet thing, like a door opening in a house that has been shut a long time. He did not say what he was thinking. I'll get the men, he said. They rode into town, 9 of them, which was more than Eleanor had planned for, and exactly the right number. Nathan and Bergen in front. Marcus Slaughter and his brothers behind. Pell's 2 eldest. Eleanor in the middle, where she had not asked to be, and where they had all without discussion put her. She noticed that, and did not say so. The main street went quiet, the way main streets do, not all at once, but one person at a time, each one stopping what they were doing and touching the elbow of the person next to them. Ross Harlow was outside the jail talking to 2 men Eleanor didn't know, and he saw them coming, and he stopped talking. Eleanor watched him calculate. She could see it happen in his face, the count of riders, the recognition of Nathan and Bergen. Then the look back to her, and the way his expression changed when those numbers came together into something that told him this was not a social call. He moved toward the street. Nathan did not change his pace. Blackwood, Harlow said. Ross. What is this? People going about their business, Nathan said. People ride into town 9 at a time for a reason. Today, the reason is the county land office, Eleanor said before Nathan could speak. She said it pleasantly. We have some public records to review, Deputy. Nothing that requires your department's involvement. Harlow looked at her the way a man looks at a fire he thought he'd put out 3 days ago. The land office closes at noon today, he said. Half day. It closes at 5, Eleanor said. I confirmed the hours this morning. They changed. When? This week. Eleanor opened her notebook. Mr. Harlow, can you give me the name of the officer who authorized the hours change and the date of that authorization? I'd like to note it here. Harlow's eyes went flat. I don't have that on me. I understand. If you get it for me in the next few minutes, I'll wait. She looked at him steadily. We'll all wait. Bergen made a sound in his chest that was not quite a laugh. Harlow looked past Eleanor to Nathan. You know what you're doing, Harlow said. It was not a question. You know who you're setting yourself against. I know what I'm setting myself for, Nathan said. For 10 seconds, nobody moved. Then Harlow stepped back out of the street. This ain't finished, he said. No, Nathan agreed. But today it started. The county clerk was a thin, sweating man named Gibbs, who went pale when 9 people walked through his door, and paler when Eleanor put her list on the counter. I need the following records under Halcombe notation, she said. H744 through H751, the series of note transfer filings from the last 24 months. Also county assessment reports for the following parcels. She set a second page beside the first. I believe these are cross-indexed under the A series in Volume 3. Gibbs looked at the pages. He looked at the 9 people behind Eleanor. I'd need to check with the... These are public records, Eleanor said. I don't need authorization to see them. I need you to pull them. She kept her voice the same temperature it had been since she walked in. Mr. Gibbs, I know you have a relationship with people in this town that puts you in a difficult position today. I'm not asking you to do anything except your job. Your job, which is a county job, which is to provide public record access to county citizens upon request. If you'd like to take 5 minutes and check with whoever you feel you need to check with, I'll understand. But I want it noted that I made the request at... She checked the clock on the wall, 2:14 in the afternoon, and that this office is open until 5. Gibbs swallowed. 5 minutes, he said. He went through the door behind the counter. Eleanor turned back to the room. Bergen was looking at the shelves of ledgers with an expression she could not read. Marcus Slaughter was standing with his hat in his hands. Pell had his eyes closed. He's going to come back and say he can't find them, Marcus said quietly. If he says he can't find them, Eleanor said just as quietly, then the record has been tampered with, and a record that has been tampered with tells us as much as a record that hasn't. Pell opened his eyes. Nathan, standing at the back, looked at her. She looked back at him for exactly 1 second. Gibbs came back alone, which meant whoever he had gone to consult had decided that 9 witnesses were too many to fight in a public office in broad daylight. Howe was carrying 4 leather-bound ledgers and a stack of folded papers. H7 series, he said. Assessment reports will take me another 10 minutes. Thank you, Eleanor said. She took the first ledger and opened it on the counter and started reading. It took her 11 minutes. She did not need the full 20 she had budgeted. It was all there. Every thread of it laid out in county handwriting, filed and stamped and official. The most damning thing Thomas Caldwell had ever done, and the one place he had never thought to hide it, because he had counted on nobody in this valley being able to read it. Nathan, she said. He came forward. She put her finger under the first line. Read this name. He read it slowly out loud. Harlow Land and Cattle Company, agent of record T.J. Caldwell. Now this one. Same. This one. Same. She went down the column. 7 note transfers, 7 families, all in the same hand, all within an 8-month window, all with the same modification clause language, all with the same county assessment request, filed 6 weeks prior. The pattern was so clean, it was almost beautiful in the way that terrible things sometimes are. Lord have mercy, Pell said. Eleanor straightened up. Mr. Gibbs, she said, I need certified copies of these documents, all of them. I need your official county stamp on each copy, and I need your signature as clerk of record attesting that these are true reproductions of the original filed documents. Gibbs had gone the color of old flour. Ma'am, I don't have authority to... You absolutely have that authority, Eleanor said. It is in fact one of the primary functions of your office. It's in the county charter. She looked at him steadily. Mr. Gibbs, whatever you think you owe these men Harlow Caldwell, whoever it is that makes you nervous right now, I want you to think about what a federal land commissioner is going to say when he asks this office for documents that should be in the public record and finds that they were withheld. She paused. Because we are going to Cheyenne. That is a certainty. The only question left is whether you are the clerk who did his job or the one who didn't. The room was so quiet, Eleanor could hear the clock on the wall. Gibbs looked at the ledger. He looked at the 9 people. He looked at Eleanor. I'll need an hour, he said. We'll be right here, she said. They were outside waiting for the copies when Thomas Caldwell rode into town. Eleanor saw him before any of the others. She knew him the way you know a man from 16 letters, not his face, which she had never seen, but the way he carried himself. Easy, assured. The way of a man who has never in his life walked into a room and expected anything but to own it. How was well dressed. Dark hat, clean coat, a horse that cost more than most men in this valley made in a year. He had 2 other men with him. Not ranch hands, the kind of men who ride with lawyers and land agents, smooth-faced and careful. He saw Nathan first, then Bergen, then a half-beat later Eleanor. And in that half-beat she watched his face. Just his face. He had not expected her to still be here. That was the thing she saw. Plain as anything. He had planned for a scared woman on a train back to Kansas, and instead he was looking at 9 people standing outside the county clerk's office with a very particular expression on their faces. His horse slowed. Eleanor did not move. Thomas Caldwell dismounted. He walked toward them with the same ease, the same assurance, and he put a smile on his face that had nothing behind it. "Nathan," he said, "didn't expect to see you in town on a Tuesday." "Tom," Nathan said. Caldwell's eyes moved to Eleanor. The smile held. "Miss Whitmore," he said, "I'd heard you were still in the territory. I meant to come and see if you were settled." Eleanor looked at him. She had thought about this moment. Not constantly. She was not a woman who spent her time rehearsing encounters, but she had thought about it in the dark between Pell's house and here the way you think about a thing you know is coming. She had thought she would be angry. She was not angry. She was clear. "Mr. Caldwell," she said, "I appreciate the concern. I'm very settled." "Good. Good to hear." He looked around the group, still easy, still smiling. "What brings everybody into town together? You boys organizing a trade or—" "We were reviewing public records," Eleanor said. He looked back at her. "Is that right?" "The H7 series primarily. Note transfer filings. And the county assessment reports for these men's properties." She held his gaze. "It's interesting reading. Very organized. Whoever filed it all was very thorough." The smile did not leave his face, but something underneath it did. "Well," he said, "I wouldn't know much about the filing process." "No," Eleanor agreed. "I didn't imagine you would. That's what agents of record are for." One of the smooth-faced men behind Caldwell moved, and Nathan moved at exactly the same moment, not toward the man, just forward one step, the same way he had moved on the station platform in front of the deputy. One step. That was all it ever took with him. The smooth-faced man stopped. Caldwell put a hand up. "No need for any of that," he said. "We're all neighbors here." "Are we?" Bergen said. It was the first time he had spoken, and he said it the way a stone drops into still water. Caldwell looked at him. "OT? Come on now. You and I have always—" "You bought my note," Bergen said. "You bought it without telling me, and you put language in it. I did not agree to, and you sent a man to assess my land low on a week you knew I was not home." Caldwell's mouth opened. "Now that is a serious, Mr. Caldwell." Eleanor stepped forward one step, not towards him, just visible, just present. "I want you to know something. Everything in that land office, every document, every transfer record, every assessment notice, every modification filing has already been copied, and those copies have been signed and stamped by the county clerk, and they are going to Cheyenne with us by the end of this week." The street had collected people without anyone announcing it. Widow Pruitt was on the boardwalk across the way. 3 men from the mercantile. A woman Eleanor didn't know with a child on her hip. Caldwell was very still. "You have no idea," he said quietly. "Now all the easiness gone. What you're involving yourself in." "I have an extremely precise idea," Eleanor said. "I have it in a notebook with page numbers." "You're going to make a very serious enemy today." "Mr. Caldwell," Eleanor said, "I traveled 1,000 miles on the promise of a man who intended to use me as a distraction. I arrived in a town that made a public game of my misfortune. I've been threatened by a deputy turned out of a hotel and told twice to go home." She looked at him straight. "I have not gone home. I am not going home. And the only enemy I've made today that I'm aware of is the one I already had." Caldwell looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Nathan. "You want to think," he said, "about what this costs you." "I've thought on it," Nathan said. "Your note comes due in March. March is 4 months away. A lot can happen in 4 months." Nathan's voice went flat and certain the way a line in the ground goes flat and certain. "Tom," he said, "that note is fraudulent. Miss Whitmore has documented how it was modified when it was modified what it was modified to, and the fact that I signed without understanding what I was signing, and that the modification was designed to be not understood. She's got the county clerk's signature on copies of every related record. She's got 7 other men standing here in the same position." He paused. "You want to tell me what you think a territorial land commissioner is going to do with that?" Caldwell said nothing. Go home, Tom, Nathan said. For 3 seconds, nothing moved in that street. Then Caldwell turned and walked back to his horse, and the two smooth-faced men followed him, and he mounted and rode out the far end of town without looking back. Widow Pruitt came across the street. Eleanor braced herself. The woman stopped 3 feet away and looked at her with the tight-pinned hair and the mouth that Eleanor had already filed under doors that don't open. "Miss Whitmore," she said. "Ma'am, I'd like to offer you that room." She said it like it cost her something significant. "If you need it, going forward." Eleanor looked at her. "Are you still concerned about the talk?" she said. "The talk," Widow Pruitt said, "appears to have shifted." She glanced toward the end of the street where Caldwell had gone. "I was wrong about you. I said so to my sister this morning. You couldn't have known." "I made up my mind before I knew," the woman said. "There's no excuse for that in a woman my age." She stood up straighter. "The room is $5 the month. You may have it for $4. "I'm staying on Mr. Blackwood's mountain," Eleanor said. "But thank you." Pruitt nodded once. Looked like she wanted to say more. Didn't. She went back across the street. Marcus Slaughter came up beside Eleanor. "That's the first time I've ever seen that woman apologize to anybody," he said. "She didn't quite apologize," Eleanor said. "No, but for her that was close." The copies were ready at 4:30. Eleanor signed the receipt, and the clerk stamped each page, and she stacked them into her notebook case, with the same care she gave every piece of paper she touched, because paper was the whole of it. The whole of it paper was the thing that saved them, or didn't. They were mounting up outside when Wesley came riding in hard from the north road, and his face said everything before his mouth did. "2 men at the ranch," he called. "Come an hour after we left. They weren't county men, Nathan. They weren't wearing badges." Nathan's hands tightened on the reins. "What did they do?" "They went through the barn," Wesley said. "Cormac ran them off with a rifle, but—" The boy stopped. "They took the ledgers, Nathan. The ones from the crate. The originals." The whole group went very quiet. Eleanor's hand went to her notebook case. Every original document Nathan owned was in that crate. 3 years of paper. The only thing she had been working from. Bergen said something low and angry. Marcus Slaughter said, "He sent them while we were here." "He knew we'd all be here," Nathan said. His jaw was hard. "He let us come to town. He let us think we had him." "He didn't know about the copies," Eleanor said. Nathan looked at her. "The county copies," she said. "He knew about the originals. He knew I'd been working from them. He took them to gut the case, take away our ability to produce our own documents." She held up the notebook case. "But the county records showed the same pattern. Every note transfer, every assessment. His name on every one. That's in my hand right now, signed by Gibbs." She looked around the group. "He took the originals to slow us down. He doesn't know he didn't. He's going to figure it out," Bergen said. "Yes," Eleanor agreed. "Which means we have less time than we thought." "How much less?" Pell said. "He'll know by morning what we have and what we don't," Eleanor said. "Which means we need to be on the road to Cheyenne before morning." The silence was a different kind than before. Not the silence of fear. The silence of men looking at each other and making a decision. Nathan turned to Bergen first. Bergen nodded. Nathan turned to Marcus. "We'll be at your place at 4, Marcus said. Nathan looked at Pell, who was the oldest of them and had ridden the hardest today and had his wife in the ground and 30 days on a piece of paper nailed to his door. Pell said, "I'll saddle my own horse." Nathan turned to Eleanor. "Cheyenne is 3 days," he said. "I know it. It's a hard road." "Mr. Blackwood," she said, "I came 1,000 miles on a train to a man who didn't want me. I believe I can manage 3 days on a horse to a man who's required by law to listen." Nathan looked at her for a moment. "I reckon you can," he said. They rode out together, all 9 of them, back up the mountain road in the last light of the afternoon, and nobody talked much, and it was not the silence of defeat, and it was not the silence of victory. It was the silence of people who have started something that can't be stopped now, which is a different kind of silence altogether. And Eleanor had never felt it before in her life, and it settled around her shoulders like something she had been cold without for a very long time. The notebook was in her coat. The copies were in the notebook. And somewhere behind them, Thomas Caldwell was finding out what she had in her hand and coming to understand something he had not understood when he bought 16 letters worth of a woman's hope and spent it like a poker chip. She was not what he had counted her. She had never been what he had counted her. And in 4 days, God willing, and the road holding a territorial land commissioner in Cheyenne was going to know that too. They left at 4 in the morning. Cormac stood in the yard and did not say goodbye, which was how Eleanor knew it cost him something. He handed Nathan a saddlebag without a word, and Nathan took it without a word, and that was the whole of it between them. Two men who had lived beside each other long enough that the important things had stopped needing language. Wesley stood at the fence. Eleanor stopped her horse beside him. "You know what to do," she said. "Watch the road. Don't let anybody in the barn. Keep the copy you've got somewhere Cormac can't find it so he won't argue about keeping it safe." "Good boy." "Miss Eleanor." Wesley twisted his hat. "You think this works?" She looked at him straight the way she wished someone had looked at her at 14. "I think we have the truth on paper with a county stamp on it," she said. "That's more than most people walk into a fight with." "But do you think it works?" She picked up her reins. "I think Thomas Caldwell has never once in his life had someone read his own paperwork back to him in front of a federal officer," she said. "And I think that's going to matter." She rode to catch up with Nathan, and Wesley stood at the fence, watching until they were gone, and Cormac put a hand on the boy's shoulder and said nothing, because there was nothing to say that the road hadn't already said. 3 days is a long time to ride and a short time to think, and Eleanor did both. The first day, she was mostly quiet, running through the documents in her mind, the way she had run through them on paper, the sequence, the dates, the language of the modification clauses, the assessment notices, the filing numbers. She needed it all at the front of her mind, because she did not know what form the hearing would take, or how much time they would have, and the worst thing that could happen was to stand in front of a commissioner and lose the thread. Nathan rode beside her and did not try to fill the silence, which she was grateful for. Bergen rode on her other side, most of the first day, and he was a man who processed things by talking, so he talked about his land, his sons, his wife's kitchen garden, the year the creek flooded and they lost 60 head and rebuilt anyway. Eleanor listened. She understood that this was how he was managing what was in front of him, and so she listened the way she would listen to a ledger for the thing underneath the numbers. What was underneath was 20 years of a man's life. That was what Caldwell was buying. Not acres, not creek water. 20 years of somebody's life, and the 20 years before that of somebody's father, and the 20 before that, going all the way back to the first man who broke the first ground. That was what the paper said underneath the columns. She wrote that down on the second night, and then crossed it out, and then wrote it again because she was going to say it. She was going to find a way to say it in that commissioner's office, if she had to say it in the last 10 seconds before they threw her out. The second night they camped, and Bergen and the Slaughter boys took turns at watch, and Nathan sat up by the low fire after the others were down, and Eleanor sat across from him with her notebook. "You should sleep," he said. "Pot and kettle," she said. He almost smiled. "Tell me something," he said. "Not about the case." She looked up. "Tell me about Kansas," he said. "Before all of this. What you were doing before he wrote the first letter." She was quiet a moment. "I was keeping my sister's house," she said. "And before that, I was keeping my mother's house. And before that, I was keeping my father's house until he left it." She turned the pencil in her fingers. "I have been keeping houses my whole life, Mr. Blackwood. Other people's houses. I am very good at it. I know how to make $4 feed 6 people, and how to keep a fire going on wet wood, and how to make a room feel like something more than 4 walls. I know all of that." She paused. "And for 6 months, a man wrote me letters and said he had a house that needed keeping, and I thought—" She stopped. "What did you think?" Nathan said. "I thought that for once it might be mine." She said it plainly, without self-pity, the way you say a plain thing. "Not a house belonging to someone I was obligated to. Something that was chosen. Something I chose, and something that chose me back." She looked at the fire. That is the whole foolish story. Nathan was quiet a moment. That's not foolish, he said. It was naive. Wanting something real for yourself isn't naive, he said. Acting on it isn't naive. The man who lied to get what he wanted is the only fool in that story. Eleanor looked at him across the fire. You are kinder than you look, she said. Don't tell Cormac, Nathan said. He has opinions about my reputation. She laughed a real one quiet into the dark, and it surprised them both a little. What about you? She said. Ma'am, you've been on that mountain 6 years, just you and an old man and a boy with no people. And 300 head of cattle. And 300 head of cattle, she allowed. Was that enough? Was that what you wanted? He thought about it. She noticed he always thought about things before he answered them, which was rarer than it should be. For a long time, he said, I didn't want anything. Wanting things felt like leaving a door open in winter. More trouble than it's worth. He turned his coffee cup in his hands. Then you showed up with a notebook and turned my entire kitchen into a filing office at 3 a.m, and I don't know exactly what I want now, but it's more than 300 head of cattle. Eleanor looked at him for a moment. Then she looked back at her notebook. Get some sleep, Mr. Blackwood, she said. Nathan, he said. She did not look up. Nathan, she said quietly. They reached Cheyenne on the afternoon of the 3rd day. Road dusty and stiff, and the city was bigger and louder than Eleanor had expected, and smaller and quieter than the men seemed to remember, because none of them had been in 3 years. She went straight to find the land commissioner's office. It was closed. The sign on the door said, Commissioner Harold Vance office hours, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 9 to 4. They had arrived on a Thursday. Bergen sat down on the step outside. Marcus Slaughter took his hat off and looked at the sky. Pell said nothing, which was worse. Nathan looked at Eleanor. Tomorrow, she said. 9 o'clock. We've got one night's money between 8 men, Marcus said. I've got $12, Eleanor said. It's this month's wages, and I'll need it back eventually, but not today. She looked at the group. There will be a rooming house near the stockyards. There always is. It won't be comfortable. It'll be one night. Nobody argued. She found the rooming house, and it was not comfortable, and it was one night, and that was all it needed to be. She did not sleep. She sat at the window with the notebook and went through the whole thing one more time, and then one more time after that, and she thought about what a commissioner would ask, and what she would answer, and where the weaknesses were in what she had, and there were weaknesses. The copies were genuine, but they were copies. The original documents were gone, sitting in whatever room Caldwell had put them, and she could not produce them. She had no lawyer. She had no letter from a bank official. She had no independent verification of the modification clause language beyond what Gibbs had stamped, and Gibbs had looked like a man who might change his mind if the right person spoke to him between now and 9 o'clock tomorrow. She wrote all of that down too. Then she wrote underneath it in the same plain hand. What I do have is the pattern. 1 family is bad luck. 7 families is a plan. And a plan leaves tracks. She underlined tracks twice. Commissioner Harold Vance was a compact man in his late 50s, with the manner of someone who had heard everything twice and was prepared to hear it all again. He looked at 9 people walking into his office at 8:58 and said to his clerk, "Chairs?" They brought chairs. Eleanor sat in the front one. "Commissioner Vance," she said. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I'm here representing 7 landholding families in the Clear Creek Valley of the Wyoming Territory. These men are the primary holders, or their representatives, and I have documentary evidence of a coordinated scheme of fraudulent note modification and property assessment manipulation, affecting over 8,000 acres of territorial land." Vance looked at her. Then he looked at his clerk. "Close the door," he said, "and hold my 9 o'clock." She talked for 40 minutes straight. She put the copies on his desk in order one at a time, and she walked him through each one, and she did not rush, and she did not editorialize, except twice once, when she said this modification clause does not appear in any standard loan instrument I have reviewed from this period, and once when she said 7 families received county assessment notices in the same 6-month window, using language so similar, It appears to have been drafted from a template. Vance stopped her on that second one. You have the assessment notices. Copies, yes, sir. Gibbs stamped. Let me see them. She put them in front of him. He looked at them for a long time, longer than anything else she'd shown him. Miss Whitmore, he said. How did you come to be involved in this? She told him. All of it briefly, no embroidery, the train, the station, the hotel, Nathan's kitchen at 3 in the morning, the crate of paper. Vance listened without expression. You have no legal training, he said. No, sir. You are not an attorney. No, sir. What are you? I keep books, she said. I have kept books my whole life. I know what numbers look like when they tell the truth, and I know what they look like when someone has arranged them to say something they weren't originally saying. She looked at him steadily. These numbers were arranged, Commissioner. Every one of these documents has the fingerprints of the same arrangement on it. Vance sat back. Fingerprints, he said. The same modification clause language word for word across 7 different loan documents supposedly drafted independently. The same 60-day window between assessment request and note call in every case. The same agent of record on every transfer filing. She put her finger on the stack. This is not 7 coincidences. This is one plan. Vance looked at Nathan. Mr. Blackwood, this woman came to your ranch 3 weeks ago. 9 days ago, Nathan said. 9 days. Vance looked at the stack of documents, then back at Eleanor. You did this in 9 days. The documents did it, Eleanor said. I only read them. Vance was quiet for what felt like a very long time. Then he opened his desk drawer and took out a form and picked up his pen. I'm going to need the agent of record's full name, he said, and the name of the company holding the notes. Eleanor felt something unlock in her chest. She gave him both. What happened next was not fast. Eleanor understood that it would not be fast, had understood it since Bergen's kitchen table, and she had not said so to the men, because there was a difference between knowing a thing and needing to hear it before you were ready. Vance sent a wire to the Territorial Attorney General's office the same afternoon. He sent a second wire to the Federal Land Office in Denver. He assigned a deputy commissioner named Rourke, a quiet, serious man who wore his reading glasses on top of his head and took notes in a hand almost as fast as Eleanor's to begin independent verification of the documents she had provided. That took 4 days. On the 4th day, Rourke came back with his own notes and set them on Vance's desk, and Vance read them, and then he said to Eleanor and Nathan, who had stayed in Cheyenne while the others went home. The modification clause language is identical in 6 of the 7 documents. Not similar. Identical. Same punctuation. Yes, Eleanor said. I know. The 7th is slightly different. The 7th was modified earlier than the others. I believe Caldwell adjusted the language after the first iteration. If you compare the 7th to the others, you'll see the intent is the same, even though 3 words changed. Rourke looked up from his notes. You noticed the 3 words, he said. I noticed them 2 weeks ago, Eleanor said. I didn't say so because I didn't want to overload what we were presenting. I can show you the comparison now if it's useful. Rourke looked at Vance. Vance looked at Eleanor. Miss Whitmore, he said. I'd like to hire you. She blinked. Sir, not today. After this is done. The territory has a land records office that has not been properly audited in 11 years. And I have been trying to find someone who can read a modification clause and knows what identical punctuation means in a legal document. And so far, the territory has sent me 3 men with law degrees, and not one of them has caught what you caught. He paused. I'm not asking you to decide today. I wasn't going to decide today, Eleanor said, but I heard you. The moment everything changed came on the 6th day, and it did not come from the commissioner's office. It came from Gibbs. The county clerk arrived in Cheyenne on the morning of the 6th day, with his hat in his hands and a leather folder under his arm, and the look of a man who has made a decision in the night and is not sure yet whether it was the brave kind or the stupid kind. He asked for Eleanor specifically. Vance's clerk brought her to the anteroom. Gibbs was sweating, even though it was not warm. Miss Whitmore, he said. Mr. Gibbs. She looked at the folder. What is that? Caldwell came to see me, he said. Day after you all left. He wanted to know exactly what you took copies of, and he wanted to know if I'd stamped them, and he wanted me to say I'd made an error." Gibbs's voice was tight. He said there was an error in the stamping process, that I'd certified documents without proper authorization. He said if I put that in writing, the copies would be inadmissible, and it would be my word against whoever was using them. Eleanor was very still. "What did you tell him?" she said. "I told him I needed to think on it." Gibbs set the folder on their chair between them. "This is the original filing ledger for the H7 series. Every entry, every date, every signature. I have been the keeper of that ledger for 11 years, and it has never left my office until today." He looked at her. "I brought it myself because I didn't trust the post, and I didn't trust a writer, and I didn't trust myself to sit on it another day." Eleanor looked at this folder. "Mr. Gibbs," she said. "Why?" "Because he asked me to lie," Gibbs said simply. "He's asked me to do a lot of things in 4 years, and I did most of them because he asked nice and the money was steady, and I told myself it wasn't hurting anybody. But when a man asks you to look a federal commissioner in the eye and say, 'Your own stamp don't mean what it says.'" He stopped. "My father was a clerk. 40 years. He used to say the stamp is the only thing that matters, son. You give a man your stamp, you give him your word, and your word is everything you are." He looked at his hands. "I let some things go that I shouldn't have. I can't undo those. But I'm not calling my own stamp a lie." Eleanor picked up the folder. "I need to take this upstairs," she said. "I know it. You understand what this means for you, in terms of what you've already done." "I do," Gibbs said. "And you're here anyway." "I'm here anyway," he said. She looked at him for a moment. "Your father would have done the same," she said. Gibbs's throat worked. "I hope so," he said. "I surely do hope so." The original ledger changed everything. Not because it said anything different from the copies it said. Exactly the same things, which was the point, which was the proof that the copies were genuine, and the stamps were valid, and Thomas J. Caldwell's name was on every page of it in ink that had been sitting in a county ledger for 2 years undisturbed. Vance called the Territorial Attorney General directly. He came the following morning, a tall man named Aldrich, who wore his authority the way some men wear a good coat comfortably, like he'd had it long enough that it had shaped itself to him. Eleanor presented the case herself. Nathan sat beside her. She talked for an hour. At the end of it, Aldrich looked at the ledger and the copies and the stack of notes with the identical modification clause and the assessment notices with their identical language, and he said, "How many families?" "7 confirmed," Eleanor said. "There may be more we haven't reached, smaller properties farther out." "What was the total acreage?" 8,340 acres in the 7 we've documented. We believe the rail corridor runs through approximately 40% of that, with a potential land value on those parcels of 12 to 15 times current assessed value once a route is announced. Aldrich did the math. He sat back. "I was buying himself a railroad county," he said. "That was my assessment," Eleanor said. Aldrich looked at Nathan. "How did you find her?" he said. "Train station," Nathan said. "He keeps saying that," Eleanor said. "I think he finds it funny." Aldrich almost smiled. Then he picked up his pen. "I'm issuing an injunction today," he said, "freezing all note call activity on these 7 properties pending investigation. That stops the clock on the 30-day notices." He looked at Eleanor. "All of them." "All of them," Eleanor confirmed. "And I'm issuing a subpoena for the Harlow Land and Cattle Company's records. All of them, including correspondence." He wrote as he talked. "If there is a pattern as consistent as what you've shown me, there will be more families. There will be records he kept that he did not mean for anyone to see." "There always are," Eleanor said. "Men who think they're untouchable keep very good records. They like having it written down." Aldrich paused and looked at her. "That is the most accurate thing anyone has said in this office in 6 months," he said. The wire reached Nathan's Valley. The same afternoon the injunction was filed. Cormac read it to Wesley on the porch, and Wesley let out a sound that was somewhere between a shout and a sob and went to put it in Eleanor's room on her pillow, which was where she kept the things that mattered. The wire said, "Injunction granted. Notes frozen. Investigation opened. Come home." It was signed Nathan. Across town in the hotel, where he had been staying since riding in 2 days after Eleanor had left for Cheyenne, Thomas Caldwell received a different paper. It was served by a federal officer at 9 in the morning, and it was not the kind of paper you argue with. He read it in the doorway of his hotel room, with his coat half on. He read it twice. Then he went back inside and sat on the bed for a long time. He had built 2 years of careful work on one essential assumption, that the people in that valley were too scattered, too busy, and too unable to read what he'd written to ever put it together before March. He had been right about the scattered, right about the busy. He had not counted on one woman with a notebook and 4 years of practice reading things that other people thought were buried. He had not counted on her being angry enough to stay. The ride home took 3 days again, but it felt different going the other direction. Bergen laughed on the second day. Full real laughter, the kind that comes out of a person when the weight that's been on them finally breaks off. He laughed until his horse looked around to see what was happening, and Marcus Slaughter said, "Ott, you're scaring the animals," and Bergen laughed harder. Even Pell, who had not smiled in 2 days of riding to Cheyenne, looked out over the road on the third afternoon and said quietly to no one in particular, "She's still there." "Sir," Eleanor said. "My wife," he said. "She's still there, in her place." He nodded to himself. "That's the whole of it." Eleanor did not say anything. She did not need to. Nathan rode beside her most of the third day, and neither of them talked much, and it was the good kind of not talking, the kind that happens between people who have already said the hard things and don't need to fill the space. "About 2 miles out from the mountain road," he said. "You heard what Vance said." "About the job?" "Yes." "I heard him." "Cheyenne is a long way from this mountain," Nathan said. "It is," Eleanor agreed. "It would be a good position." "It would. I'm not—" He stopped. "I'm not saying you shouldn't take it. I want to be clear about that." "I know you're not. I'm saying—" He worked the reins. "I'm saying I'd like there to be a reason you considered not taking it. That's all I'm saying. I'm not asking for anything more than that." Eleanor rode for a moment. "Nathan," she said. "Ma'am, you hired me for $15 a month to sort a crate of paper." "I did." "There's still paper left in that crate." He was quiet. "There's a widow on the east side," Eleanor said. "Martha Foss. We never got all her documents, and there may be 2 more families Pell mentioned that we haven't reached." She looked at the road ahead. "And your books are not fully sorted. I have at a very conservative estimate another 2 months of actual work owed to you." A pause. 2 months, Nathan said. "Minimum." Another pause. "And after 2 months?" "After 2 months," Eleanor said, "we can talk about Cheyenne." Nathan looked at her from under his hat. "That's not a yes," he said. "It is absolutely not a yes," Eleanor agreed. "It is a woman telling you she is not done with what she started, and that she does not make decisions about her life on the back of a horse 3 miles from home." She glanced at him. "But it isn't a no either." Nathan looked back at the road. Something in his face settled. 2 months, he said. 2 months. "And the books. And the books. And Martha Foss. And Martha Foss," Eleanor said. "Obviously." He nodded once. They came up the last bend of the mountain road, and the ranch came into sight, and Cormac was in the yard, because he had been checking the road every 20 minutes since the wire arrived, though he would die before he said so. He looked at all 9 of them riding in. He looked at Eleanor. He made a sound in his chest that was unmistakably relief. "Supper's been ready an hour," he said. "I suppose you all think the world waits on your schedule." "Cormac," Nathan said, "don't. We won." "I know you won. I got eyes, don't I? Come inside before it's ruined." He went. Bergen started laughing again. Eleanor dismounted and handed her horse to Wesley, who took the reins and then stopped and looked at her with his whole earnest 14-year-old face. "Miss Eleanor," he said. "Did it work, really?" She thought about Pell on the road saying she's still there. She thought about Gibbs and his father's stamp. She thought about Gibbs's voice when he said, "My word is everything you are." She thought about a ledger in a county office that had sat there 2 years, telling the truth to anyone who came to read it, waiting with the patience of paper for the one person who would. "It worked," she said. Wesley let out a breath so long it seemed like he'd been holding it since she left. "Good," he said. "Good. Because Cormac cried. When the wire came. He thinks I didn't see, but I saw." Eleanor looked at the house where the lamp was already lit, and the smell of something real and warm was coming through the open door, and somewhere inside that house, Cormac was clattering pots and pretending the last 9 days had not cost him a single night of sleep. "Don't tell him you saw," she said. "No, ma'am." Wesley agreed. "I wouldn't dare." The injunction held. That was the first thing, and for the first week back, it was the only thing that mattered, that the paper was real. That the federal stamp meant what it said, that no man in the territory could walk up to any of those 7 front doors with a 30-day notice and have the law behind him. Eleanor knew it was holding because nobody came. Every morning for the first 4 days, she woke before the house and stood at the kitchen window with her coffee and watched the road because she understood Thomas Caldwell well enough by now to know that a man who had spent 2 years building something quiet did not simply accept the unbuilding of it. He would look for the seam. He would look for the place where the paper was weakest and push there, and she wanted to be awake when he found it. But the road stayed empty. On the 5th morning, Nathan came into the kitchen and found her at the window and said, "He's not coming." "Not today," Eleanor said. "You can stop watching the road." "I'll stop watching it when I know why he's not on it." Nathan poured himself coffee and came to stand beside her at the window, not close enough to be anything other than 2 people looking at the same road, but close enough that she was aware of him, the way you're aware of a fire in a cold room. "Rourke sent a wire," he said. Eleanor turned. "When?" "Yesterday evening. I didn't want to tell you at supper because Bergen was here, and it wasn't his news yet." He set his cup down. They went into the Harlow Land and Cattle Company's office with the subpoena. Pulled everything. Correspondence ledger's drafts of the modification clause going back to the first version. "The one that was different," Eleanor said immediately. "The 7th document. The draft was in his files," Nathan said. 3 versions of it. The first one, the adjusted one, and a 3rd one he never used. He looked at her. "Rourke says the 3rd version had 2 additional families named in it. Families he hadn't gotten to yet." Eleanor put her cup down on the sill. "Who?" "Martha Foss was one." She had known it. She had known it since Bergen's kitchen when Nathan said the widow's name the first time. "And the other, man named Delacroix. French-Canadian, came to the territory 8 years back. Small outfit south of Pell's. Rourke is writing out to him today." "He doesn't know," Eleanor said. "No. He's been going about his life not knowing there was a file in Caldwell's office with his name in the draft column." She pressed her hand flat on the windowsill. "Nathan, how many more are there like that? Men and women who don't know yet?" "Rourke's looking," Nathan said. "That's all we can do right now." "It's not all I can do," Eleanor said. He looked at her. "Martha Foss," she said. "I've been putting it off because there's been too much else, but she's been out there 3 years alone on land that was already in Caldwell's draft file, and nobody has told her." She picked up her notebook from the table. "I'm writing out today. I'll come." "You don't have to, Eleanor." He said her name the way he'd started saying it in the last week, not as a formality, not as a courtesy, as a thing that was just hers, and he was careful with it. "I know I don't have to." She looked at him for a moment. "After breakfast," she said. "After breakfast," he agreed. Martha Foss was 44 years old and had the particular quality of women who have done hard things alone for so long that they've stopped expecting anyone to help them. She came to the door of her ranch house with a rifle and set it down when she saw Nathan, and she looked at Eleanor with the careful, assessing look of a woman who has learned to read people fast because she cannot afford to read them wrong. "Mrs. Foss," Eleanor said. "My name is Eleanor Whitmore. I work for Mr. Blackwood. I'd like to talk to you about your banknote." Martha Foss's eyes went sharp. "Come in," she said. She had coffee already going, which Eleanor took as a sign that a woman who always had coffee going had learned to expect that any day might require it. Eleanor put the relevant copies on the table and walked her through it the same way she had walked Nathan through it, the same way she had walked Bergen through it, the same way she had stood in front of Commissioner Vance and done it cleanly in order without softening what was hard. Martha listened without interrupting. When Eleanor finished, Martha sat with her hands wrapped around her cup for a long moment. "My husband signed the original note," she said. 18 months before he died. I signed the modification." She paused. "I thought it was a renewal." "It was designed to read as a renewal," Eleanor said. "I can read," Martha said sharply. "I want to be clear about that. I can read." "I know you can," Eleanor said. "I'm telling you that a man who does this for a living, who has done it to 9 families that we know of, constructed this document specifically so that a person reading it in good faith would read it as a renewal. That is not a failure of your reading, Mrs. Foss. That is the whole of his skill." Martha looked at her. 9 families, she said. 9 that we know of. The Territorial Attorney General's office is investigating further. "And my note is frozen under the same injunction as the others," Eleanor said. "You are protected as of the day it was filed, which was 11 days ago. It applies retroactively." Martha set her cup down with a precision that suggested she was managing something significant. "Nobody told me," she said. 11 days, and nobody came to tell me." "I know," Eleanor said. "I'm sorry. There was a great deal happening, and you were on my list, and I should have come sooner." "It's not a blame," Martha said. I'm just saying, I've been out here 11 days not knowing." "I know it." Martha looked at Nathan, who had been sitting quietly at the end of the table. "Mr. Blackwood," she said, "is she as good as she appears to be?" "Better," Nathan said. Martha looked back at Eleanor. "What happens now?" she said. "Now the Attorney General's office builds the case for fraud. They have the draft documents with your name in them that puts intent on record, which is different from error. It shows he planned to come for your land before he'd even finished with the others." Eleanor folded her hands. "Your position is actually one of the strongest on paper because the draft proves premeditation." "So my name being in his file," Martha said slowly, "is the thing that helps me." "The thing he thought was private is the thing that proves it," Eleanor said. "Yes." Martha made a sound that was not quite a laugh. "Lord," she said, "isn't that something?" Then she looked at Eleanor again with that careful assessing look. "You're the woman who came on the train," she said, "for Caldwell." "I am." "I heard the story, the way it went around." Martha's voice was even. "I want you to know I didn't laugh at it." "Thank you. I thought about it," Martha said, "and I thought that woman is going to have a very hard time, and there's nobody out here who's going to make it easier for her. And that's a cold thing to know about a place you live in." Eleanor looked at her. "It was cold," she said, "but it turned out to have its uses." "How so?" "A woman nobody watches can read every piece of paper in the county," Eleanor said. "I said that once before. It's still true." Martha Foss was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Will you come back? After this is all done, would you come back and help me go through the rest of my paper?" "Yes," Eleanor said. "I will." "I'll pay you." "We'll talk about that." "I'll pay you," Martha said again firmly. "I don't take things for free, and I don't want to start." Eleanor smiled. "Then we'll talk about what's fair," she said. The hearing in Cheyenne was set for the 3rd week of October. Commissioner Vance sent word himself a formal notice that was also, in its way, a request could Miss Whitmore be present as a witness, and if she was willing as a consultant to the Territorial Land Office during the proceedings. Eleanor read the letter at the kitchen table with Nathan across from her, and Cormac, pretending to do something at the stove, that did not require the level of concentration he was giving it. "Consultant," Nathan said. "That's what it says. That's a step past what he offered in his office." "It is." "Are you going to do it?" Eleanor folded the letter. "I'm going to think about it," she said. "You've been thinking about it since Cheyenne." "I've been thinking about Cheyenne since Cheyenne," she said. "The job is a different thought." "What's the difference?" She looked at the letter. Cheyenne is a city, she said. It has offices and telegraph lines and a land commissioner and a territorial attorney general. And it is in practical terms the place where things get decided for people like the ones in this valley. She paused. And this valley is where the people are. Nathan was quiet. Those are not incompatible things, he said carefully. No, she agreed. They're not. A person could... He stopped, started again. A person could do the work in Cheyenne and live on a mountain. 3 days' ride, Eleanor said. There are faster routes. In summer. In summer, she agreed. In winter, it's 3 days minimum, and you know it. In winter, Nathan said, the work in Cheyenne slows down. Eleanor looked at him across the table. He looked back at her. Cormac made a sound at the stove that was technically the sound of a spoon on a pot, but communicated something significantly more editorial. Cormac, Nathan said. I'm cooking, Cormac said. You are eavesdropping. I am doing both, Cormac said serenely. I'm old. I'm efficient. Eleanor pressed her lips together. The letter asks for an answer by Friday, she said. It's Wednesday. I know what day it is. You've got 2 days. I know that too, Eleanor said, and she picked up her notebook and went out to the porch because she thought better outside, and both of them knew it. She was still on the porch an hour later when Wesley came and sat on the step below her without asking, which was a thing he had started doing in the last 2 weeks, and she had started expecting. Miss Eleanor? Wesley. Are you going to Cheyenne? I'm thinking about it. For good. She looked at the boy. He was trying to make his face say it didn't matter, and he was 14, and he was not yet old enough to make his face do what he told it. Come here, she said. He came up and sat beside her on the bench. I want you to listen to me, she said. Carefully, because this is something I mean every word of. Yes, ma'am. 2 months ago, I stepped off a train in this territory with $5 and a suitcase full of letters from a man who had used me for a joke, she said. I had nowhere to go, and no one who was looking for me, and a town full of people who had decided what I was worth before I opened my mouth. She looked at him. And I sat down on a bench, and a man came and stood between me and the thing that was coming at me. And he did it without asking for anything back, and he took me up this mountain, and he gave me a crate of paper and a job and a table to work at. She paused. And you carried my suitcase without being asked. Do you remember that? Wesley nodded. And you told me that Cormac was right, that the man who works at a hard thing in private when nobody's watching is better than the one who already knows everything. She looked at him. I have not forgotten that. I don't forget things people say to me that are true. Wesley was very still. So when you ask me if I'm going to Cheyenne for good, Eleanor said, I want you to understand that whatever I decide about that job, this place is in me now. These people are in me. You are in me. She put it simply because it was simple. You don't unbelong somewhere that changed you. Wesley swallowed hard. Okay, he said in a very small voice. Okay, she agreed. They sat there together for a while, not saying anything, which was one of the best things two people can do together, and one of the rarest. The twist that nobody had expected came on Thursday morning, the day before Eleanor's answer was due. It came in the form of a rider from Cheyenne, not a federal officer, not a wire, but an actual human being on a horse, who arrived at the ranch at 7 in the morning with a sealed envelope and the particular expression of a man who has been told to put something directly into someone's hands and not leave without confirmation. He asked for Miss Whitmore. Eleanor came out in her coat with her coffee still in her hand. The envelope was from the Territorial Attorney General's office marked urgent, and when she opened it, the letter inside was 2 pages, and she read the first page and stopped. Nathan came out behind her. What is it? She handed him the first page. He read it slowly. His jaw tightened at the second paragraph and did not relax after that. He flipped, Nathan said. He flipped, Eleanor said. Thomas Caldwell had 2 days prior presented himself voluntarily to the Territorial Attorney General's office with his own attorney and offered to cooperate with the investigation in exchange for a negotiated settlement. He had confirmed the scheme. He had confirmed the modification clause was drafted by his attorney at his direction and applied uniformly across all 9 families. He had confirmed the county assessments were coordinated with a county official, not Gibbs, a different one, an assessor named Toll, who had since been suspended. I had done this, his attorney stated, because the subpoenaed records made defense untenable, and because this was the line that made Eleanor's hand tighten on the paper, because he wished to note for the record that the scheme had been independently identified and documented by a private citizen with no legal training, and that the thoroughness of that documentation had left him with no viable alternative. He had, in other words, confirmed that Eleanor had beaten him. Not in those words. Lawyers never use those words. But that was what it said. "He's trying to get ahead of it," Eleanor said. "Control the terms of what he gives back." Can he do that? He can try. The Attorney General can accept or refuse the terms. She turned to the second page. Vance is recommending that all 9 note holders be made whole, original loan amounts, restored modification clauses, voided water surveys annulled, and Caldwell's company forfeits any claim to the properties. Nathan read the second page himself. He read it twice. "The land," he said. "It goes back." "All of it," Eleanor said. "Every acre, clean title, no encumbrance." She had known this was the likely outcome since Cheyenne. She had known it the way you know a conclusion after you've seen enough of the evidence, not with certainty, because nothing in law is certain, but with the kind of informed confidence that lets you sleep most nights. But knowing it and seeing it in print with a federal seal on it were 2 different things, and Eleanor stood there in the morning with her coffee going cold and let it be 2 different things for a moment. Pell's wife was still there, in her place, behind the fence he had built himself. "I need to write to Bergen," Eleanor said, "and the Slaughters and Pell and Martha Foss and Delacroix and the Greeley family." She was already turning back toward the house. "They should hear it from someone they know before a federal letter arrives." "Eleanor," Nathan said. She stopped. "Come here a minute." She turned around. Howe was still standing on the porch step, the letter in his hand, and he was looking at her with an expression she did not have a word for. Not simple enough to be gratitude, and not simple enough to be anything else she could name. "You did this," he said. "We did this. Bergen Road, Pell Road, Marcus Slaughter." "You did this," Nathan said again quietly. "You came off that train with $5, and they gave you a bench to sit on, and you took that bench, and you turned it into this." He held up the letter. "I want you to know I know that. I don't want it to go unsaid." Eleanor looked at him. She had been many things in her life that people hadn't said out loud. She had been useful, and she had been overlooked, and she had been taken for granted, and she had been lied to, and she had been the person who kept things running while someone else got the credit. She had never stood in front of someone who saw the whole of what she'd done and said it plainly, without diminishing it, without making it into something he'd done instead. She did not cry. But it was a near thing. "Thank you," she said. "Nathan." "Yes, ma'am." "I'm going to write those letters," she said. "And then I'm going to write to Commissioner Vance and tell him yes." A pause. "Yes to Cheyenne," he said. "Yes to the consultant position, not Cheyenne." She looked at him steadily. "They can have me in Cheyenne when the proceedings require it. The rest of the time, I have books to keep, and a valley full of paper to read, and a widow on the east side who is going to pay me what's fair whether I like it or not." She tilted her head. "And I believe there was mention of a 2-month contract that hasn't been renegotiated." Nathan's mouth curved. It was the most complete smile she had seen from him, and it changed his whole face, took the weathered, careful solemnity of it, and turned it into something that had been there all along underneath, waiting for the right occasion. "There was mention of that," he said. "I'd like to renegotiate the terms." "What terms?" "Length," Eleanor said. "I'd like to extend it indefinitely with a quarterly review, and either party may end it with 2 weeks' notice and no hard words." He was quiet. "That was the original language," he said. "More or less." "More or less," she agreed. "Indefinitely," he said. "Indefinitely," she said. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he held out his hand. She shook it. His hand was warm and work rough, and it held hers for exactly 1 beat longer than a handshake requires, and then let go. And they both looked somewhere else, and that was enough for now, and they both knew it was enough, and they both knew it was not all there was going to be. The hearing took place in the 3rd week of October as scheduled. Eleanor sat at the consultant's table in the territorial commissioner's office in a dress she had pressed the night before, and her notebook open in front of her, and she answered every question Aldrich put to her in plain language. And when Caldwell's attorney tried twice to characterize the documentation as incomplete, she put her hand on her notebook and said, "Both times, I have the specific page number if you'd like to see it." And both times the attorney declined. It lasted 4 hours. At the end of it, Aldrich rendered his recommendation to the court. All 9 notes voided. All 9 titles restored. Harlow Land and Cattle Company dissolved by order of the territory. Thomas Caldwell banned from holding any interest in territorial land for a period of 10 years. Ross Harlow removed from his position as deputy pending further investigation into his role in the county assessment irregularities. And a separate recommendation, filed the same afternoon, that the Territorial Land Office establish a records review position for the purpose of conducting annual audits of all filed modifications and assessment reports in all 17 counties of the Wyoming Territory. The position was in Vance's recommendation, ideally suited to someone with experience in bookkeeping, a thorough understanding of Halcombe notation, and a demonstrated ability to identify coordinated document manipulation. High had named no names in the recommendation. He had not needed to. Bergen threw a supper, not a small one. He killed a hog and put 4 tables end to end in his yard, and his sons lit lanterns on posts, and his wife cooked for 2 days, and everybody came. The Slaughters, the Pells. Martha Foss, who brought 2 pies and set them down like a woman making a statement. Delacroix and his family. The Greeleys. Widow Pruitt from town, who arrived with a covered dish, and the dignity of a woman who had made a decision to show up somewhere and was going to see it through. Gibbs came. He stood at the edge of the yard for a while before Bergen saw him and walked over and said something Eleanor could not hear, and then put his hand out, and Gibbs shook it. Eleanor watched that from across the yard. "He didn't have to come," Nathan said beside her. "No," she agreed. "He could have stayed home. But he's here. He's here." She watched Gibbs talk to Bergen's wife, who was offering him pie. That's the thing about a decision like the one he made. Once you've made it, you can't unmake it, and you can't be the same person you were before it. So you might as well show up. "Is that a general philosophy?" Nathan said. "Or are you talking about yourself?" Eleanor looked at him. "Both," she said. Cormac found them later in the evening, when the lanterns had burned lower, and the talking had gone from the loud kind to the good, easy kind, that means people have eaten well and are comfortable with each other. He came and stood beside Eleanor and did not say anything for a moment, which was how she knew something real was coming. "I owe you an apology," he said. "Cormac. Not the first one. The first one I gave you, and you accepted it, and we're done with it." He did not look at her, but at the lantern in front of them. "I mean the one I owe you for the whole month before the first one. Every day you were on that mountain, and I was hard on you. Suspicious. Made it plain I didn't want you there." "You were protecting Nathan," Eleanor said. "I was protecting the mountain," Cormac said. "Nate don't need protecting. He hasn't needed protecting in 20 years. I just—" He stopped. "It gets to be a habit. Keeping things the same. Keeping strangers out. Telling yourself that nothing new is better than something that might hurt." Eleanor looked at him. How was 70? Something years old, and he had lived on that mountain his whole long life, and he was standing at a supper in October saying a hard true thing out loud, which was more than most people managed in a whole lifetime. "Cormac," she said, "you put coffee down beside me at 3 in the morning without saying a word." That was everything," she said. "At 3 in the morning, when I didn't know yet whether any of it would work, and I was too proud to say I was scared you put the coffee there. You didn't make a speech about it, you just put it there." She looked at him steadily. "Don't apologize to me for being a man who shows what he means in the doing of things. I've known too many who did the opposite." Cormac was quiet. Then he said gruffly, looking still at the lantern, "You'll stay." It was not quite a question. "I'll stay," Eleanor said. He nodded once firmly, the way a man nods when something has been decided that needed to be decided. Then he went to get more pie because that was what Cormac did when a conversation had cost him something. He went and got food and pretended it had cost him nothing at all. Wesley found her near the end of the night. He was carrying 2 cups of something warm, and he handed her one with the careful pride of a boy who has done a thing correctly. "Cider," he said. "Bergen's wife made it." "Thank you." He stood beside her, the way he stood beside her on the porch, comfortable in the quiet. "Miss Eleanor," he said, "can I ask you something?" "You can always ask." "That man, Caldwell, he thought you were nothing. He thought you were a joke." "He did," Eleanor said. "And instead, you were the one who ended him." "The law ended him," Eleanor said. "I just read the paper." "You know that's not—" Wesley gestured with his cup. "You know that's not what I mean." "I know," she said. "I'm saying it anyway because it's true and it matters. I didn't end him by being powerful. I ended him by doing the work that was in front of me carefully and completely, and the law did the rest." She looked at the boy. "That's available to anybody, Wesley. The careful work. It's not a gift you're born with. It's a decision you make every morning." He thought about this. "Is that why you stayed?" he said. "On that bench, when you could have gotten on the next train?" Eleanor held her cup in both hands. She thought about the bench, the boards under her feet, the $5.40, the town that had made a game of her misfortune, and the man who had stood between her and the next thing that was coming at her without asking for anything back. "I stayed," she said, "because getting back on that train would have been the only thing that ever happened to me." She looked out at the yard full of people whose land was still theirs, whose names were still their own, whose fences still stood where they had built them. "I'd spent my whole life keeping other people's houses, and I was not going to spend the rest of it keeping the story he'd written about me." She paused. "A person gets one life. One. And the fact that someone told a lie about its value does not make the lie true." Wesley was quiet for a long time. "I'm going to remember that," he said. "Good," Eleanor said. "Write it down." He laughed, surprised. "You think writing things down fixes everything," he said. "I think writing things down is how you prove what's real," she said. "And yes, I think it fixes most things." She held up her cup. "Everything else you fix with coffee and stubbornness." He clinked his cider cup against hers, solemn as a judge. The lanterns were nearly out when Nathan came and stood beside her at the edge of the yard where it was quieter, and they stood there together, looking back at the tables and the people and the last light of Bergen's supper. "Good night," he said. She looked at him. "Good night," she said. "That's all." "I'm working up to something else," he said. "Take your time." "I will." He stood there a moment. "I've been on that mountain 11 years," he said. "And in those 11 years, I've done one brave thing, which is that I taught myself to read better with a lamp and an almanac at this table every Tuesday and Thursday, because I was ashamed of not knowing, and I decided being ashamed wasn't better than knowing." Eleanor looked at him. "That's a brave thing," she said. "It's the only one I've got." He turned to face her. "Until you. What you did, what you came off that train, and did, I don't have a name for what that takes. And I don't want to say the wrong thing and make it smaller than it is. So I've been waiting until I had the right words." "Nathan," she said, "I'm not done." She waited. "You told me the first night that you weren't looking for another man," he said. "This year, or maybe any year. And I said I understood, and I did understand, and I still understand. I'm not asking you to change that." He looked at her steadily. "I'm asking whether that's still what's true. For you. Right now. Because things change, and I'd rather ask wrong than assume right." Eleanor held his gaze. She thought about the bench, and the 3 in the morning, and the road to Cheyenne, and the back of a horse in October, saying it isn't a no either. She thought about coffee put down without a word, and a hand held 1 beat longer than it needed to be, and a man who went to the station because a fella at the Mercantile was making a joke of a woman he'd never met, and it sat wrong with him, and that was the entire why, and there was no noble reason in it. That was the whole of him. No noble reason. Just a plain one. Just the right thing done, because it was right, not because anyone was watching. "Ask me again in the spring," she said. He was quiet. "That's not a no," he said. "No," she said. "It isn't. It isn't yes either. It's an honest answer from a woman who arrived on this mountain 9 days ago with $5 and has not yet finished what she started." She looked at him. "Give me a winter. Let me do the work. Let me find out who I am in a place that isn't somebody else's house." Her voice was steady and certain the way the mountain was steady and certain behind them. "And in the spring, ask me again." Nathan Blackwood stood there in the last of the lantern light and looked at her, and his face had that thing in it again that she did not have a word for, and she did not need one. "Spring," he said. "Spring," she said. He put his hat on, and he nodded once, and he went back toward the tables where Cormac was telling Bergen's wife something that was making her laugh. Eleanor stood there a moment longer alone, and she looked at the mountain behind them, dark and enormous and solid. And she thought, 9 days ago, I had $5 and a suitcase and a bench. She looked at the people around the tables. Pell still awake at 9 o'clock because his wife was in the ground behind a fence that was still his. Martha Foss talking to Delacroix's wife with the ease of a woman who has just learned she is not as alone as she thought. Wesley, who had carried her suitcase without being asked and told her a true thing at 14. Cormac, who put coffee down in the dark and never made a speech about it. Nathan, who had gone back to the table and was listening to Bergen's story with his full attention, the way he gave his full attention to everything he thought was worth it. She pulled out her notebook. She opened it to the last page she'd written on, and she wrote one line underneath everything else, and she underlined it once, and she closed the notebook. The line said, "This is mine. Not the mountain, not the case, not the job in Cheyenne, or the renegotiated contract, or the federal injunction, or the 9 families whose land was still their own. All of that mattered. All of that was real. But the thing that was hers, the thing that no man had given her, and no court had granted her, and no scheme of fraudulent paperwork had ever had a claim on, was the knowledge of what she was made of. She had come 1,000 miles for a man who had used her like a chip in a card game. She had stayed for no one but herself. She had done the work that was in front of her carefully and completely. And the valley was still standing. A person is not defined by who leaves them behind. A person is not defined by who underestimates them, or overlooks them, or makes a public game of their misfortune. A person is not defined by what they arrive with, or what they lack, or how a town of strangers decides to see them on the first day. A person is defined fully, finally, and without appeal by what they choose to build when all of that is done. Eleanor Whitmore had arrived with $5 and a notebook. She had built a valley back to itself. And the spring was coming, and the work was not finished, and her name was her own, and she was exactly where she had chosen to be. That was everything. That was more than everything. That was enough.